Hello and welcome to the Pittsburgh City Council budget hearings. I am Councilwoman Erica Strasburger and I chair the Committee on Finance and Law. For this hearing, we will hear from the Office of Management and Budget, including the Operating Budget Division, the Capital Budget Division, the CDBG Division, and the Procurement Division. And while we are awaiting other council members joining us, I'll ask our Budget Director, Pete McDevitt, to give a brief overview of the department.
Thank you, Councilperson. The mission of the Office of Management and Budget is to ensure the effective and efficient use of available resources in order to sustain the delivery of quality services to the residents of the City of Pittsburgh. OMB is organized into the following core teams to strengthen citywide financial and grant management. There is the Management Division, Capital and Asset Management, Community Development, Operating and Special Revenue, and Procurement. A position summary for 2026, there are 37 full-time positions in the 2025 general fund. Most of that is moving 311 from the mayor's office to OMB. And a quick summary of non-personnel changes. Overall, there's a $281,578 decrease in non-personnel operating budget. That includes a $111,000 decrease in professional and technical services. There's a $306,000 increase in property services, and that's for the first vehicle target cost and increased land and building due to the increases for deposits into the Building Improvement Fund, BIF operating and capital accounts, and an increased 200 Ross property maintenance, a $97,000 increase in other services for insurance premiums, and a $575,000 decrease in supplies. And in the capital budget, OMB has a handful of capital projects. Those pretty much all flow through the community development team for CDBG dollars and ESG program, HOPWA, and that's it for that. And for trust funds, OMB has the community development trust funds for those CDBG dollars. And the Bridge Asset Management Program Trust Fund flows through OMB as well as the Facilities Trust Fund and the Lead Safety Trust Fund. That's all I have.
Thank you. Pardon me. For members and directors of the department, can you please introduce yourselves and then proceed with your presentation?
Jake Pollack, Deputy Mayor of the City of Pittsburgh and Director of the Office of Management and Budget.
Patrick Cornell, Chief Financial Officer.
David Hutchinson, Assistant Director for Capital and Asset Management.
Kelly Russell, Assistant Director for Community Development.
Thank you very much. And very quickly, we've been joined by Councilmember Barb Warwick.
Thank you.
Start sharing now.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and council members, for the opportunity to present. We're going to begin by providing an overall summary of the proposed 2026 operating and capital budgets as a whole. As you are aware, the Office of Management and Budget coordinates the process by which that budget is prepared and address some high-level topics, and then from there flow into discussions of individual items that fall within the actual unit of OMB. And I would like to begin there by acknowledging the will of council that was adopted yesterday to call for further conversation between the administration and council as we work to conclude this year's budget process. We are happy to engage in a conversation with members and council leadership around outstanding concerns that have been raised across council's budget hearings with individual departments over the last month in the hopes of reaching a conclusion that everyone finds satisfactory. Much of my presentation on the overall budget today will focus on areas that we believe are central areas of concern based on the discussion at previous budget hearings, and to address why it's the perspective of OMB that the that the existing budget proposal is balanced and meets the needs of the city in 2026, understanding that there are concerns from council, just to provide that as a starting point for those discussions around continuing areas of concern. So I'll start with looking at the 5-year financial forecast. The first slide here presents the 5-year revenue forecast. We are expecting a $680,527,000 $837 in revenue in 2026. That number is very close to what we projected it would be a year ago, so we believe that over the long haul, our financial projections in the forecast are holding true. The major trend to look at, and I think this is called out on a later slide, is that year over year real estate tax revenue is declining, which is a unique situation for the city to be in. And we'll be discussing how that factors into the proposal that we assembled. Looking at expenditures, we've proposed a $635 expenditure for the year, producing a surplus in 2026 of just under $2.5 million. This slide also shows that the three main criteria for a compliant budget, which is a positive operating result, a fund balance as a percent of expenditures of greater than 10%, and of greater than 10%, and debt service as a percent of expenditures at less than 12% is adhered to. We get very close to that debt service line in 2026. This is a known issue that we've been talking about for a number of years. 2026 is the year in which we pay off significant debt that was refinanced during the height of the COVID shutdown. So we've been anticipating high debt service in 2026 for nearly 6 years at this point as a city, and you'll see that number drops off dramatically beginning in 2027. So while we move close to that line, we think that is under those circumstances a comfortable position to be in. To do a comparison of growth, and this is the main driving issue that the city is confronting financially. If we look at revenue growth projections over the course of the 5-year plan, we see revenue growth at just over 1% in each year from 2027 through 2030. I'll reiterate something I mentioned a moment earlier. The reason for the driving factor for that for the city of Pittsburgh, which is, there are other municipalities where this is also an issue, and then also other factors that contribute to that. But the driving reason that our forecast shows revenue growth that is that modest is the way in which our forecast takes into account the common level ratio and a court order that shows the starting point by which property tax appeals are calculated, going to a lower and lower value every year. That is a factor that is imposed from the outside, in this case by a court order based on a dispute between a taxpayer in Allegheny County and how that level was calculated. A fundamental premise to the budget that we have proposed, and this is the reason that I'm getting into this, is that condition is unsustainable not only for the city of Pittsburgh, but for every municipality in Allegheny County. And as a result, we anticipate that while there is not a date known yet by which that will be resolved, we don't expect it to remain the case through the course of the entire 5-year plan. We are showing it here because we don't have another data point to offer. But we believe that we will see at some point, either through reassessment or further litigation, a change in that condition that will allow property tax revenue to stabilize and begin increasing again. And so for that reason, while the budget we are proposing has a narrow margin for error, we believe that over the course of the 5-year plan, that there is time for council and the future administration and the city as a whole to incrementally adjust to these challenges as new information becomes available. For further point of comparison there, the 2026 to 2030 growth comparison, we are seeing expenses grow by more than 2% and between 2 and 3% depending on the category, for a total of 2%, 2.2% in 2027 and 3.4% in 2028. So one fundamental structural condition here that must be addressed will be for how long is the current state of play around the common level ratio, creating that disconnect between property tax revenue growth and expense growth, because the growth rate of expenses here are not unprecedented for the city. They are, I think we would say, fairly in line with or better than regional and national trends, right? We're not seeing explosive expense growth. We are seeing is artificially depressed revenue growth. And once again, we are proposing a 2026 budget and 5-year plan that, while the margin for error is narrow, we can show will hold long enough for further information to surface about the long-term implications of that disparity. Having said that, I would just, again, some more members have joined. I'm presenting this simply to explain the thinking that went into the proposal we've offered as a starting point for discussion of some of the particular areas where there are concerns. Pat, do you want to talk about the revenue forecast and assumptions further? Or?
I'll just touch on it briefly. All this information is in the budget document itself. On the revenue side, almost 4/5 of our projected revenue is tax revenue, 78.8%, non-tax revenue comprising 21.2%. And of those major tax revenues, the largest is now earned income. It traditionally has been real estate, given the challenges that the director just talked about. Those two categories have kind of shifted places over the past few years, and then payroll preparation and parking tax. And then through the discussion of revenue assumptions, I know Director Gula, is really the driver of the revenue forecast, and the Department of Finance was already up here, but I would just hone in again on the assumptions that real estate is projected to go down. And when you think about it and compare it to prior year budgets, the numbers we are at, which we'll get to in the next slide, are very far below what we had projected before COVID for the 5-year plan, even before some of the reassessment and the common level ratio discussions started. Other than that, there is expected modest growth for our major tax drivers as we move into the 2026 to 2030 5-year forecast. And I'll just remind council that what you are going to be considering is legal appropriations for 2026 as a budget year, and then the remaining 4 years are the forecast and the plan, but those are not legally appropriated until those years come up. Like I mentioned, if you look at actual real estate tax collections, as of this morning, posted in the system is just under $145 million. We do not have any revenues posted yet for December. The November books have not yet closed. But knowing the real estate cycle, we typically do not see a lot of revenue in December, just because of the nature of how the tax is paid. And this is comparable with taxes from 2019. So we've had this upward trend, and then in COVID, COVID happened, and then with the reassessments, it's just dropped. So we're starting to grow back again.
With the common level ratio adjustments,
Sorry.
Yeah.
You're right. With the common level ratio adjustments, we're starting to see growth, but it is still significantly down from where we were 6 and 7 years ago. On the expenditure side, this is the culmination of everything that you have discussed at all of your other budget hearings, $678 million. The majority of that is personnel costs, salaries and benefits, and things like pension and healthcare. Those really are the drivers of the city's operations every year. And then the third largest category would be debt service. Like the director said, we do have major payoff. Well, it's not a payoff. We have balloon payments in 26 and then a major decrease in 27 and beyond. The next two slides show, we've been talking about these lean years for several years now. This is a snapshot of our budget engagement presentation from 2023 when we were talking about the 24 budget. The things that brought us to 25 and 26 as lean years have been known for several years at this point. We knew that American Rescue Plan operating support would drop off after 2024, and we knew about this debt cliff that was also related to COVID.
From there, we just want to turn to a discussion of three areas where we know there has been a great deal of discussion in previous budget hearings as areas of concern, and address why, while we acknowledge the concern and are happy to work together to address it, we want to point out from our perspective why perhaps the scale of the concern is different than what has been part of the discussion to this point. So looking at salaries and wages, much discussion during these budget hearings and preceding it has focused around the question of premium pay, or what is more commonly referred to as overtime, and how the estimates for, or the projections for 2025 were much lower than the actual costs, which is true. The point that we want to make is that the lion's share of that overage is offset by savings in actual wages, which produces a net swing in that category that is much smaller than the $20 million that is commonly referenced. So very briefly, the way in which we think about salaries, including overtime, is to look at the actual amount budgeted for wages. There is a factor that is included in the budget that is part of that calculation that is called the vacancy allowance, which we budget for every position that is included in the budget to be filled all year. We assume that there will be periods of time during the year in which any number of positions will be vacant. We typically take a conservative assumption about how much time that will cover that is often less than what is actually the case, because it takes time to hire, go through interviews, things of that nature. And so the actual wages less the budgeted wages less the vacancy allowance is what we anticipate actually spending. That vacancy allowance and then any other savings that go above and beyond the vacancy allowance in actual wages come from the same pot of funds as premium pay. And so as a result, we would expect that the amount that we spend on premium pay will often be higher than the budgeted amount, because some portion essentially of what goes out the door as overtime is coming from the budgeted amount for overtime, but some portion of it is also coming from the savings when a position is vacant for longer than conservatively anticipated. And so what you'll see here is, if we look at beginning in 2021, regular wages budgeted, the vacancy allowance, and then actual regular wages, we are producing savings in regular wages in the millions of dollars a year every year. And this year, those savings reached $16,175,682. Set it against a overtime overage of $20,950,932. That produced a net deficit on salaries and wages, but it is of $3.2 million, not the much larger $20 million number that has often been reported. And so I bring that up to say, again, we believe that we have accounted for this in the 2026 proposal, where we increased the budget for regular wages, the vacancy allowance, and the premium pay budget, because we see the actual amount that this year's spending varied from the budget as much smaller than the raw $20 million figure. And so I'm bringing this up to help council understand our thinking, right? We're not reacting to a $20 million difference. We are reacting to a smaller difference when we assembled this budget and when we're talking about this issue. I can point to specific examples that we believe contribute to that variance, right? We made aggressive assumptions about the ways in which some recently negotiated collective bargaining agreements would produce savings in overtime. Those assumptions were overly aggressive. However, we have seen the corresponding savings in wages, which means that the longer time that it is taking for us to see the impact of those changes is not having the extreme net impact on the overall bottom line that you might be led to believe when looking at media coverage that suggests that the challenge is in the ballpark of $21 million. There are then also some changes to the demand for overtime that were not able to be anticipated at the end of last year when this budget was adopted. I've referenced this example with council members before, but when we had to move to close the Panther Hollow Bridge for urgent repair, the fire station there was a fire station, the district of which served both sides of the bridge, and their ability to meet their response time standards required them to cross the bridge. They could no longer do that. So for almost the entire year, we've had a fully staffed extra fire crew on the further side of the bridge from the station in order to ensure we're able to secure adequate response times. And so that would have produced a variance no matter what. In any event, when you consider the savings from regular wages against actual premium pay paid, we are, we think, in a much closer range. Another area of frequent discussion is utilities, where there's concern about whether the current year budget or the 2026 proposed budget adequately prepares for the costs we expect to incur. We wanted to point out some longer-term trends in those two areas. First, looking at electricity, you will see what has been budgeted for the general fund since 2021 and what actual general fund expenditures have been. And if you were to look only at those two items, you would rightly see a ongoing deficit, right? We are routinely budgeting less in the general fund than we are paying for utilities, and I can understand how that would give rise to concern. What is not captured in that analysis is the fact that every year a portion of our utility payments are coming from special revenue funds that correspond to the facilities that are receiving that electric service. In particular, the money we spend on electricity for our streetlights is paid out of the Liquid Fuels Trust Fund. So again, if you look only at the general fund figures, you would see an ongoing deficit. When you look at the totality of the budget's allocations for these services, the numbers then do net out in balance. Of note, this year, those special revenue accounts have not yet been charged for our electric costs. So you will see, as of today, 2025, the expenses exceeding budget, but that is because that reconciliation with the trust funds has not yet occurred. With that in mind, we view the $800,000 increase from 25 to 26, coupled with an anticipated contributions from the special revenue funds, as adequate. Again, I'll keep returning to this phrase. I'm not denying a thin margin for error, but adequate as it relates to electric expenses. The same picture is true in water for a different reason, but the net impact is the same. So we have, as relates to our payments for water, the city has historically, since we began paying for water, we've budgeted funds for those water payments at a level consistent with what anticipated usage would be, and then for many years we were only paying a percentage of our bill, but the actual payment of those expenses was ultimately done through a true-up process where we combined our water bill with other fees we may owe Pittsburgh Water against Pittsburgh Water's liabilities to the city, which include permit fees and things of that nature. And then the amount that we paid was the net of those two numbers. That is then reflected as the total true-up number at the bottom of this table. That, again, will be occurring in 2025. So you can see here how with the general fund budget combined with the true-up number is results in balance. We are also, and Patrick can talk about this for a moment, we have been gradually working to shift to a situation where we are paying the full value of those water bills and not including those in the true-up, or we would move the true-up to only being, you owe us for this permit, we owe you for that permit, we'll true those up, but move the bills out of that. That's been an incremental process we've been building towards, and that process will continue. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So where you see that in the budget is in Public Works, in their water line. What we had in the proposed budget was $8.5 million, and that is meant to explicitly cover our water usage costs, our sewage costs, or things like the normal costs that Pittsburgh Water would charge us. In the past, like Jake said, it had been offset by things like pension payments that Pittsburgh Water owes the city, or permits or things like that. Where we have moved is we want the expenses to be the expense, and we want to process the revenues as the revenues. So there's corresponding revenue lines in the certified forecast that factor in what we expect Pittsburgh Water to pay the city for its contributions for pensions, and then we expect permits to process through the appropriate departments as they actually come in.
Finally, a topic of discussion that we just wanted to address at this stage is funding for the city fleet. In the past year, we've benefited greatly from the expertise of Furman Maurice, the city's new fleet manager, who brings a wealth of experience in capital asset planning for fleets like the cities, and that has resulted in much greater and more detailed information around what the projected actual cost of keeping the fleet in a state of good repair would be. Of course, as council members know, that ideal target number for spending annually would be $20 million, which I will admit our proposed 2026 budget package does not reach. However, it represents further incremental progress towards that goal. In the 2025 budget, the allocation for fleet across multiple categories of expense, so general fund, pay-go, and special revenue accounts, was $7.425 million. Our current proposal is $10.161 million, or $10.162 million. So, and neither of those figures include grants. So, were there additional resources available, we certainly think that fleet is an area that is worthy of targeting for greater expenditure. We believed, for all the reasons I just described, that we were able to produce a budget proposal that met the standards and criteria for balance, with a thin margin for error that allowed for an adequate and improving level of funding for fleet, though less than what our target would be, without having to pursue deeper cuts than those we've proposed or a tax increase. And so that's where we went as a beginning to the conversation. That covers a brief summary of the overall thinking of the administration and the Office of Management and Budget that went into the composing of this proposed budget. We're going to briefly allow Patrick and the assistant directors here to talk about the budget proposals for their individual teams within the office itself, and then we'll be happy to take your questions about the entire budget package.
Thanks. On the management side, I want to note, my specific role in ARPA compliance, that will continue. The city is responsible for submitting quarterly reporting to the federal government. There will be one annual performance report that will be due next July. A lot of the time that I spend at the end of each quarter working through departments with our partners, with the URA, with Pittsburgh Water, with the county, is really to check in on the projects, make sure things are going well. I've spent a lot of time, have to give major shout outs to Anthony Byland in law, and before him, Kristen Erickson, who helped get all these contracts through. We had a known period where we had to do everything between 21 and get contracts done at the end of 24. We are in our kind of spend out period for 25, and there's 1 year left. But we've been working really closely with our partners to make sure that things are moving and are on track to finish out successfully. I do expect to have some reallocations in the future, specifically to capture funds for projects that are fully complete. Otherwise, those funds would not be able to be spent. Per our Treasury guidelines, we have to incorporate those into contracts or projects that were already in place at the end of 2024. So we can't add new projects, but what we can do is kind of capture funds that are no longer needed in Project A and help offset costs in Project B if that is coming up. So we're working through that as projects finish up, and there will be more to come. I always send those emails out to the task force and the group, letting you know that our reporting is there. We've been working with Controller Heisler to finish up the audit for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. It's been a pleasure working with the audit team on that front, and then they will jump right into 2025, and we know that there will also be an audit for 2026. We have not had any major outreach from the federal government with respect to monitoring. At the end of President Biden's administration, I was in touch with their, the fiscal recovery funds manager, and they were impressed with what we were doing with our plan, and we're continuing down that same path. Is there anything you want to say about the management largely? On the operating and special revenue side, Assistant Director Liz Sircone is not here because she had a baby 2 weeks ago. So she's on parental leave. I hope she's not watching right now. But the operating team and the grants team have been continuing their work. Of course, this work product is the biggest thing for them for the entire year, but we continue down with the budget document itself, quarterly reporting, and digging into special projects as they come up. On the grants side, we have 21 major state and federal grants that were awarded this year, over $15 million. It's been a good journey to figure out how to improve the grants process. I know working with Councilmember Warwick, I hope some of the things that we've implemented and kept you abreast of have helped. But we are always working with departments to really balance the pros and cons of going after awards for the city of Pittsburgh. And then just to jump back to what Council Budget Director McDevitt was saying earlier, on the operating side, some of the changes that you see in the budget for OMB proper are known contract changes, right? We've known, and Council has approved, and it's part of the agreement, what the TransDev First Vehicle Services amounts steadily increase each year of the plan. One thing that is different for 26 and 25 is Pittsburgh Water will be working with TransDev directly. What we had done in the past is budgeted for their costs and then offset with a reimbursement. Like we alluded to for utilities, we want monies in to just be monies in and expenditures out to be for the city on expenditures out. We did increase building maintenance for 412. We have worked through, again, Director Gula represents the city on the Joint Management Committee for 412 Boulevard the Allies. They are slowly and iteratively working on a better budgeting process for that building. That's, the city, the Housing Authority, and the URA. Between the September and November budgets, they approved their budget, and we were able to react accordingly. We are hoping to get them to do their budget in advance of the September budget as we move forward. But the increase for 412 represents the city's portion for all known and planned capital projects for the next year. And then we do still have 200 Ross, so we had to add back in monies to maintain the shell of that building in safe conditions. We have been anxiously looking forward to removing this amount from the budget, and it just pushes a little bit, but we are feeling good about it. We'll see what happens in 2026. I'll let Dave talk about the capital side.
Yeah, for capital, we've kind of been in the same holding pattern we've been in for the last 3 or 4 years, where we're continuing the existing projects we've already committed to. We're still finding that any project delays not only delay service deliverability to residents, but also increases the cost of the projects. So we try to be as much of a resource as we can on the capital side. Thank you to Eric and Brendan on our team for working so closely with departments to try to problem solve around things, like when the bids come back 2 or 3 times the amount budgeted. To Patrick's point, we try to scramble and find funds with the departments to try to backfill those. But we're kind of left with the same shell game at the end of the day that eats up into our outer years. So our 6-year capital improvement plan right now is mostly built out of projects that are already in flight. We'd like to add more projects in the future. We'd obviously love to have more PAYGO as well for vehicles. But I will say the Capital Program Facilitation Committee, which also includes Pete and Kirsten, from the Council Budget Office and also somebody from the Controller's Office, our scores for fleet really aligned closely with what Furman was recommending anyway. Furman gave us this really great detailed list of full kind of replacement cycle, what the top 50 priorities are, and our scores aligned with that really easily. So it was good to see that alignment and to be able to get kind of the highest need knocked out first with the PAYGO dollars that are available, but we hope to continue to work with Furman in the future to get through the fleet needs.
Other key things on the capital side, we have our metrics for bond. Our general fund expenditures cannot be over 12% of debt service expenditures cannot be more than 12% of the total general fund expenditures. Director Gula also works very closely with the capital team as we go out for bond issuances. We did a review of the debt policy, and that will be up at council for discussion in the next few weeks. No major changes. Of course, this was the first year we went out for a competitive bond sale, and we're looking forward to kind of debriefing that with council as part of this debt ordinance change recommendations. But it has been a good partnership with finance. I alluded to it before. We do have outstanding general obligation debt going back to 2014. We will be paying off 2014 and 2027. And then after that, things move out in our regular, 20-year cycle. And this 2020 Series A and B is the refinancing that happened after, during the pandemic, before the American Rescue Plan was announced. And those are the big balloon payments that have increased our debt service in 25 and 26. Anticipated debt issuances, this has been discussed at length during these budget hearings. And like Dave said, a lot of it is projects that are already in flight and on the course for the 6-year budget cycle. A few years ago, we worked very closely with departments to move to budget things in the appropriate phase, planning, design, and construction, as opposed to just here is $15 million for construction. Because what we were finding is we weren't going to need $15 million for construction all at once. Why would we take out the debt when it was going to be used 3-4 years later? So we've gotten into a cycle of planning out the layers with departments, and that has worked well. And then, one thing that we always like to highlight, our credit ratings have gone up. Every time debt is issued, the rating agencies have to review the city's outlook. And we are always keeping tabs on not just the city, but also the regional economy is another contributing factor there. And I will let Kelly talk about community development.
Give me one more. There we go. Good afternoon. So OMBCD is a little bit different. We manage and we're completely funded by the U.S. Department of HUD. The U.S. Department of Housing, better known as HUD. We are responsible for 4 different programs. There's the Home Investment Partnership Program, deals with affordable housing. That's managed by the URA. The Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, HOPA funding, that's managed by the Jewish Healthcare Foundation. The Emergency Solutions Grant that deals with those who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. That is a program we cooperate with Allegheny County's Department of Human Services, and of course CDBG, which benefits low to moderate income city residents. So our funding works a little bit different. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about what we received in 25. Our 26 funding is dependent upon Congress approving the budget, which hasn't happened yet. We're hopeful that the amounts we receive in 26 will be comparable to what we received in 25. So with that being said, for 25, for home, we received a little under $2 million. Funds are used to improve housing options for low-income individuals and families. Those funds help subsidize developers who are looking to create affordable housing options. As I mentioned, that program is run by the URA, and they use that for their rental gap program and their for-sale development program. An example of the home partnership at work is if you're familiar with Melon Orchard out in East Liberty area, that was funded by Home Dollars. Let's talk about housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. As you can see, we received a little over $1.4 million in 2025. That program addresses individuals who have HIV or AIDS and how their system with financial assistance for rent, mortgages, utilities, helps with permanent housing facilities, and referrals to essential services like case management and mental health services. And as mentioned before, and a couple of weeks ago when that legislation came up, that program is operated by the Jewish Healthcare Foundation. And as I just talked about the Jewish Healthcare Foundation, the next slide just talks about how they use that funding to help those who have AIDS and HIV find housing options. Emergency Solutions Grant. You can see in 25, we received a little over $1.1 million. I talked about how that program is co-operated with the Allegheny Department of Human Services, and we use that program to help with certain shelters and also rapid rehousing programs. An example of a program that we funded with ESG funds is Bethlehem Haven. They use that program for ESG, I should say they use the ESG funds to help women in crisis and provide them with supportive services. And of course, everybody's favorite, the CDBG dollars. As you can see, we received a little over $12.8 million. Those funds benefit low to moderate income city residents, and we use the CD funds for a variety of ways, for capital projects, through nonprofits with the Public Service Grant and the Neighborhood Economic Development Program. And of course, for city improvements, they must benefit an eligible census tract or population. So as we look, once again, I'm focusing our stuff from 25. You can see through the pie graph that the biggest chunk went to affordable housing. Then we had demolition, admin and personnel, senior programs, the Neighborhood Economic Development Program, public services, workforce development, housing counseling, and fair housing promotion. And then this next slide will show the breakdown of how the funding went. We had $5 million for the Bedford Dwelling Choice Project that went through the URA, a little over $2 million to PLI for demolition, $1.1 million for our department's personnel, $1 million to the URA for housing development, $800,000 for the senior community program through Parks and Rec, $720,000 for the Neighborhood Economic Development Program, $650,000, that includes the Public Service Grant Program for City Council, and $200,000 for the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank. $330,000, for the Pittsburgh Employment Program through HR and Civil Service. $220,000 for our department's administration. $210,000 for the Neighborhood Employment Centers through HR and Civil Service. $175,000 for personnel for the URA, $100,000 for the Urban League's Housing Counseling Program, another $100,000 for the Public Service Grant Program through the Mayor's Office, and then $30,000 for fair housing that goes to the Commission on Human Relations. And lastly, really want to talk about the opportunity. While everybody's excited about the NFL draft coming here next year, our department is more excited about the National Community Development Association's annual conference that's coming to Pittsburgh next year, the NCDA. It is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization composed of 500 local government agencies across the United States. Our department worked with Visit Pittsburgh to secure the RFP for the 57th annual conference. It will be held at the Wyndham Grand June 8th through the 12th. And we're expecting 300 to 350 individuals from across the country to come and learn about Pittsburgh. As the host city, we're responsible for a Wednesday evening reception and a Thursday afternoon bus tour of community development. I'm excited about this, you can't tell. Community development and housing programs. So it's our opportunity to bring people to Pittsburgh and show them what we have to offer here. Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Kelly. The last thing I'll say about the community development allocations that you see in the 2026 budget, because of the federal funding cycle, those are just proposals. Our federal year begins October 1 and then continues through. So we are just getting started now with our fiscal federal year 2025. The federal government shutdown did delay that, so we are just now getting approval from the federal government to tap into those reimbursable dollars. So until we know next summer what the federal government is going to do for their federal fiscal year, And until we get a signed agreement from HUD, the things that are in the budget right now will remain proposals. The process to move through the budget proposal to the actual HUD-approved allocation involves an annual action plan that is approved both via public comment by the city. We always use Chamber, so we thank you for that, and HUD itself. And then we also have, the last thing on that front, there are still COVID-related HUD dollars and Treasury dollars that Kelly's team is working with. The one that will continue on the longest is Home ARP, which we've been at the table discussing
Many a time.
for many times now.
I won't spend time dwelling on these. The Office of Management and Budget also includes the city procurement team and the fleet team, both of which are under the supervision of Chief Procurement Officer Jen Olzinger, who is unfortunately not able to join us here today as she is ill, but I'm happy to address questions related to their work as we go. But I've covered the highlights as it relates to fleet in the budget proposal earlier in my presentation. So with that, we're happy to take questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll also note for the record, we've been joined by Councilwoman Gross, Councilperson Charland, Councilman Coghill, and Councilman Wilson, and Council President Lavelle, who's joining us online. So with that, I think we'll start at the far end with questions and work our way back. If you're ready to go, or I can start with someone else. Either way is fine.
Thank you. I was actually just kind of like starting with the last thing first, which is I keep trying to look up that conference, and all I'm getting is like the National Career Development Association. You send that to council members. That is exciting. We like to show off our neighborhoods, so please involve council offices, because it's great, I think, to be able to partner with visitors from other cities to show off our local projects. So I have some various notes, and they are all fairly in the weeds, but I think that's the nature of this budget hearing.
Absolutely.
Right. So one of the comments I'll make is that we have had much distress, and this is for the public as well, over the PWSA water bills, right? We know that 2025's isn't fully paid. I think it's 13 million outstanding, and that there's 10 million projected for next year as well. One of the things we've asked, and we're working on, but we can't really say, and I think I'm not sure if it came up in the DPW budget hearing, or it was one of the hearings recently. I was like, what's the water bill for? What is it paying for? Is it, how much of it is buildings like this building versus swimming pools, which are really important to our constituents? And the answer was something like, well, we get 500 separate paper bills, and they all come as just a giant mountain. Like, it's like literally a stack of bills, and so it was hard to analyze. And so literally on my way out here, I passed a rolling cart full of PWSA bills that council staff is beginning to approach. So does anyone have a guesstimate? Like, how much of that is swimming pools?
It's a great question, Councilwoman. I don't believe, for all the reasons you just mentioned, that it is very easy for us to provide an answer at this time. That it is staff within the Department of Public Works Bureau of Administration that process those bills, and because it is so labor intensive to manage them on paper in that way, they don't have the capacity to do the types of analytic work that we would normally like to do to be able to answer those types of questions, because I would like to know that information as much as you do.
Right.
But at present, we don't have the capacity to do so.
So currently, council staff on payroll are like opening these bundles of, because they come in packets, like a giant kind of mailing packet, and are about to like start typing in,
Sure.
Water meter by water meter.
Right.
And if you see, like, each paper bill looks very similar to your residential paper bill. And it's got the same little bar charts on it, and it's got a water meter and like some vague address, because of course, something like one of our parks is very large, right? And so, is that actually the meter number for the swimming pool or for the facility is like unknown, right? And so now we're going to have to ask and figure out,
There is a model for the type of improvement we would like to see in this area, which is the one that council recently discussed with the DPW team around how the changes we recently made in the same issue with Duquesne Light. We had the same challenge with Duquesne Light where we were receiving the bills in exactly the same form as what you've just described. Over the course of this year, we have been able, working with Duquesne Light, to transition to an all online system with nested accounts where individual metered accounts are totaled up into parent or master accounts around certain types of spending.
We did get that description during the DPW hearing.
And I don't need to belabor it. My point is simply to remind that is the objective. We're kind of moving through them utility by utility. So we thankfully have that information there, but we would like to get there with PWSA as well.
Got it.
If I could add too.
Kind of not.
Okay.
Because my point is not about your system.
No, I would like to make work easier for your staff. That's
Okay.
what I was going to offer. So because all of those paper bills come, what PWSA Pittsburgh Water is doing is every quarterly, we would like it to be as frequently as possible as we move into the next iteration of the relationship. We have a formal invoice. I have an Excel file of January through July. That is what I have received so far, and that does have meter numbers, water, sewer, stormwater, Alcosan, and a total. So we do get those occasionally. We've worked it through in the true up in the past, and we're hoping it becomes more frequent. Those do have service addresses, and that's what I was going to be willing to share with your team.
Great. Mr. Carter, duly noted, please connect with Mr. Cornell. He's working on it right now. And, but I will reiterate that the bill I looked at had an address, but the address is very large. You don't know from the bill that I just looked at a few minutes ago whether that's the pool or the rec center, or both, right? So I would love to see that spreadsheet too. Please send it to me. Because, does it have just a parcel number for each meter? Does it have 10 meters on a parcel number, et cetera? I bet it does.
It's complicated.
Yes, it is, right? And so we will be working through that now because it's great. It's fine. We'll set up yes, I believe that people are working to set up some better electronic system in the future. Mm-hmm. But for right now, we also need to know, because I'm going to make another point. I don't want you to make the point. I don't want you to make your point. I'm going to make another point, which is that when you, just like your bill, if that has a balance that's been carried forward, I just want to say on the record that some of those old amounts may possibly not even be accurate. Because I lived through the billing problems of Veolia. So also, I would like to see, not today, not a discussion of it, but I would like for our OMB department, along with DPW, to be sleuthing through those. Because those bills were gobbledygook. They were completely bungled and we sued Veolia over them. So if there are balances, and which may be true on the old meters, we weren't under the co-op, we're repaying them now, but just look for it, right? Sure. So especially when there was that couple of years when they switched over to the smart meters that were really dumb meters that screwed over a lot of our residents. So that's a concern to me, but I just don't want to take any more time on that. So that's why I know that you're working on it. I understand that the systems will improve, but if there's any way that some of those bills aren't really bills we should be paying, we want to know about it.
Happy to explore that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Similarly, I understand, I'm kind of going backwards in the packet. When we get to utilities and there are mentions about using, for example, the special revenue funds in order to pay some utility bills, the example that was provided was streetlights paid out of liquid fuel tax. Sure. But it's still city funds that are being paid, right? And so we, I think, are right to be concerned about the utility bills. And this isn't anything that OMB did wrong. But as citizens and as municipalities, when we see the hikes in rates of electric rates by the electric companies of Pennsylvania, And, people are drawing a direct cause and effect with the expansion of data centers in the state to the increase already on the load, especially in our grid, that because the utility companies or whatever doing giant capital projects, whatever, like all of our rates are going up. And so I just want to flag that as an area that we should all keep our eyes on and be concerned about, right? It's almost like, hey, maybe we should have our own electrical production plant, because guess what? Some cities do that. They just have their own damn power plants for these very reasons. It's the same reason we have our own water plant, kind of, sort of, almost now. But yes.
Very briefly.
Please.
I don't dispute any of what you've just said about rising costs of utilities for both entities like the city or normal ratepayers, and the degree to which that should be a question of concern. By pointing out the distribution of those costs across the general fund and the special revenue accounts, we were simply trying to provide a holistic accounting by which the 2026 proposal can be interpreted, so that you can understand that when you look at actual expenditures and see a general fund number that is lower than that, that's not in fact a deficit, but it's just simply not accounting for the way in which the special revenue funds also pay. So we were bringing that up from an accounting perspective. From an actual public policy perspective in the utility market space, I think your comments, I would certainly agree with them, Councilwoman, and so I just wanted to note that.
Thank you. And then, again, I'm going actually backwards in the presentation, and I think it's important that you have a chart that goes backwards in time, and I think, Deputy Mayor, you mentioned it yourself, that expenditures, and again, that's important for the public. You see a lot of comments online and in social media comments, some from city residents, some not from city residents, right? There has been no ballooning or explosion of expenditures, right? There's a chart in here that we're being presented that looks at, and for the citizens, you can look at the OMB website on the city website, and you can go back, 30 years of city budgets.
Just about, yes.
Right? So you can go look at them yourself. But if you look, especially like in the last 10 years, there's been no ballooning of expenditures. Expenditures are increasing, but they are not increasing out of pace with other regional governments nor other mid-sized cities across the country, right? We have, things have doubled and tripled in price over the last 10, 15 years. Supply chains, we've all experienced it. But just to reiterate, and then I'll finish out, I think when we're talking about why the revenue projections are lower than we projected 3 or 4 years ago, I think we should recap that, right? So we've had several court cases that were against us that I think were really unfortunate. Tell me the correct name for the
Facility usage fee?
Thank you. Facility usage fee, which most of the media and citizens refer to as the jock tax, on athletic, facilities. And so, tell us again, how much are we not getting that we should have been getting? We had projected that we're getting.
It was about $6 million.
So boom, $6 million right there. Right, and so we've talked a lot. We're all kind of like, it's in the ballpark of like 30 million that we feel like we need to make up to bring increased revenue or decreased expenditures. We need to bring these a little closer. So that one's that. And then you mentioned, I think, in your presentation that another thing is that there's of the real estate taxes, which is what we're talking about when we talk about your millage, that the current budget proposal is looking at about 143 million in revenue from those, just from property taxes, not all taxes, but just the real estate tax. But that had been projected to be higher, and you mentioned the common level ratio court case, which was one aspect. And so recap that one.
If I could actually put together two issues here. Okay.
Just one at a time.
Okay. The common level ratio court case was a litigation brought by a taxpayer against Allegheny County I think it was started in 2020, but in which a judge ultimately ruled that the calculation that is used to determine the starting point, the starting discount in a property appeal case was too high. The county had set that in the 80% range. A judge immediately lowered it into the 60% range. And crucially and frankly devastatingly for municipal finances in general, has it set to go down every single year. That means that when new appeals are started each year, they start with a lower and lower presumed tax burden. And so we are seeing, as appeal cases start every year, the amount of those appeals and the tax relief being provided in those appeals becoming larger and larger. And that is counteracting other market growth in what would be real estate
So
taxes.
a judge, right, in one ruling lowered our real estate income, our real estate tax income. And that's especially bad, which is not true of every municipality in Allegheny County, but if you have $30 million buildings, right, one property, that's a $30 million building. And then that one goes from 80% of the $30 million assessment to 60% of the $30 million. So it really is a big lump. So do we know in the ballpark of, in the appeals so far since that ruling, what real estate tax income has been lost? I would say it's got to be 20 million.
Last year was, I believe it was over $10 million that we refunded back.
I can answer that question by
Those were refunds.
Correct.
But then,
And then
Yes.
how does it impact the forecast
So-
moving
Yes.
forward?
So I can answer that question a slightly different way, but I think it gets to the same point. Before we incorporated the impact of the common level ratio ruling into our financial forecasts, we would have targeted real estate taxes for next year at roughly $160 million. I looked back at our last forecast before we started projecting them downward, which the first time we did that was in 2023. So the forecast before that. On that basis, it's $20 million a year and growing while that ruling is in effect.
so yeah, about 20 million and growing. And then, so those two hits. And then I'll point out that another thing that is happening again, because we're in the post-pandemic world, and especially us and other mid-sized cities where you've got a central business district with all those buildings for offices. Any place where you have like employment hubs where people literally used to go to work every day. And in the state of Pennsylvania, downtown Pittsburgh was the second biggest employment hub and Oakland was the third, both in the city. You know, people are literally appealing those assessments immediately, right? And so, God, and you know, even some of them are in forfeiture. So it's not just the common level ratio, but we're really, really seeing substantially low. I mean, to me, that's the problem.
It is not just the common level ratio, but the common level ratio exacerbates it. People would appeal for a variety of reasons, but because the common level ratio means that the second they file an appeal, they start at 48% rather than 100% of their assessed value, it means that the rulings are producing much larger swings. So yeah,
Downward swings.
yeah, much larger downward swings. The common level ratio would be reset to 100% by a reassessment, and that would just change the landscape of those cases. That's the main
Which is the
factor.
landscape of the cases, but would also incorporate, you know, every building in the county, including every building in the city, and every property in the city, so that we would see a less inconsistent valuation of especially residential properties.
It would also absolutely do that.
Right. Okay, so I think those were my main points. We got some really wonky questions about utilities, and we really have a budget that's having a problem because of like a series of unfortunate events with especially real estate income revenue. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move down the line. So, Councilmember Warwick. Thank you. And actually, I wanted to check, does anyone or Council President online have a strict time cutoff? Okay. Councilmember Warwick.
I mean, just in terms of the budget, I don't, I feel like we're sort of in a confusing moment, right? Because we had, and I mean, I'll let Director McDevitt also speak to this. I mean, we're hearing from your side that, the numbers line up, that we should be fine, but it's tight. But then we're hearing, that we are 13.5 million in the hole for overtime, that we're going to see 13.5 million more in overtime, likely 6.5 million more likely for utilities. And then of course the fleet, I feel like everyone is on the same page about the fleet, right? And I am Furman and the ELA team has been abundantly clear that we need to be putting $20 million a year into fleet. Right now we have 10, and I believe we should put in another 10 and then have the funds in outgoing years to continue to put in 10 at minimum, right, every year moving forward. So I don't really know, it's sort of, you're here at the table, or for myself, at any rate, it's a difficult situation to be in, right? So I don't know. I guess I'd ask Director McDevitt if you have anything to add, because again, it's hard. Like on the one hand, we're being told by yourself and by the controller that this budget doesn't add up, and there's also issues with estimates for labor agreements and such. And I know it's awkward for everybody to sit together at the table and kind of hash this out, but at least for me, I would appreciate hearing, your take on it as our budget advisor.
Yeah, no, just some self-reflecting on my own. I should have been sitting down with these guys more over the past month, but what Director Pollock has outlined specifically for the overtime cost, like that is accurate, that they can build in vacancy allowances, and that's actually one of the things that we showed you to cover the police payroll costs, that we know that we're not going to be fully staffed at 800 officers.
Correct.
So our suggestion to you was to actually build in the vacancy allowance that reflects that to cover those overtime costs. For everything else, if we're expecting to just not hire people and cover the overages, because we're going to pay $24 million this year for fire for premium pay. I have no reason to expect, I don't think anybody has any reason to expect that we're going to pay less than that next year. So what I would have done would to actually reflect that and then show elsewhere, we're not going to hire any of these positions. That's just not what they did. They can do that within the budget as it goes, but then you're just not hiring people. So that's also what we showed you as a solution. Like, these are vacant positions that you can cut from the budget that you can then put towards putting honest figures for what we're going to do for overtime. But then it also shows honestly what we're not budgeting in other departments and where operations will then be diminished there. So those are solutions that you can do. Like, you can make this budget work as is. It's just you're gonna have a lot of diminished operations that are not foreseen in how it looks, in my opinion. As far as a lot of the utility stuff goes, we used to, last year we did pay streetlight bills to the tune of around $1 million out of the, straight out of the Liquid Fuels Trust Fund. We haven't done that at all this year. I guess that's why it's so far over budget. But according to DPW, they need that money for salt. They don't intend to actually pay light bills out of that. That sounds like a conversation between DPW and OMB to figure that out. But we also want to make sure that the rates are going up for everything, and there's very, as Dr. Pollock said, like, there's very little wiggle room. So if something goes awry, as the best laid plans of mice and men often do, we are up a creek without a paddle.
May I respond, Councilor?
yeah,
I mean, I don't think that we are by we, I mean myself and Director McDevitt in our comments, that far off, and based on what he's just said. You know, I acknowledge that the proposal that we put on the table, I've said has a small margin for error, which I think is consistent with where he just ended his remarks. And we have been working with DPW as recently as today on addressing some of those questions about the utilization of special revenue accounts to cover some of the costs of utilities. I think we are going to find a workable solution for everyone that more closely reflects past practice than what the actuals are showing today without depriving them of the resources that they need. I understand council's desire, as expressed through the will of council you all adopted yesterday, discomfort perhaps with how tight that margin for error is in our proposal, and a desire to provide a greater margin. I think we are happy to discuss the changes that could be necessary to achieve that. I am, you know, it is our presentation at this point to say we think that the scale of difference that we are looking to solve for is smaller than some of the numbers that have been publicly stated. And I'm not pointing necessarily to you all, but in general, right, what has been stated by other participants in the conversation and then ultimately recorded in the media. I don't believe it is a $30 million difference. I understand why that has been a number that has been part of this conversation based on what you've seen, and some of what we're presenting here is simply to show why we think that there is a smaller variance to be discussed over the next week to reach consensus. So overtime is a good example, right? I don't maybe share Director McDevitt's concerns about the impact on operations in a relative sense, right? Because if you look at the history here, what is in fact has been the case for some time, right, is that the basically positions stay vacant for longer than we account for in the vacancy allowance. And I'd like to change that condition. That is that is something that both we've been working towards over time and will take a long time to address. So we're not going to see a drastic shift, is what I'm saying. We are less efficient than we could be in that regard, and likely will remain so to a degree. But I think we could also at the same time build a stronger cushion. So I'm simply suggesting that the gulf that we're trying to address is perhaps smaller than has been discussed to this point.
I mean, but then if you become better at turning over those open positions, then you have less money to pay for overtime.
We would say we would also utilize less, because the overtime that is being utilized is in part to cover
a lack of people.
Correct.
And what about the labor agreements? What about the money that's been budgeted for future labor agreements?
So we have police, Teamsters, ASME 2719, right?
Correct. There are three bargaining groups that remain open, who have 1/1/26 expiration, or 12/31/2025 expiration dates. With FOP, we have moved through arbitration proceedings that will move into a rebuttal day next week, and then it'll go into January. With Teamsters and ASME 2719, there are still bargaining days scheduled for the remainder of this year. Our proposal does work in expectations and dollar amounts for what we think might be the final resolution as our kind of guidelines and guardrails.
And why do we do what? And Director McDevitt, why do you feel that those? Because I mean, apologies, folks, but I'm just like repeating what we were told yesterday. So,
so
why those are not realistic?
There's $2.75 million set aside in human resources as an allowance that is meant to go towards those. And just historically, I think we looked it up. It was a little over $2 million in 2019 that it increased for just police. So that was 6 years ago. That number is probably going to be higher, and that's just for one of them. So again, very little wiggle room.
It's also not the only place where there is money set aside for bargaining. Within the salaries and wages lines of each of those departments, there's also money worked into the numbers.
Yeah, and police in the outer years, it definitely shows it right there.
Okay. So I guess just general question, obviously, I've proposed a fairly significant tax increase, which we have not had a tax increase in 11 years, a real estate tax increase. So what I've proposed would generate approximately $41 million in additional revenue. It is, again, I will say it again, I feel like we need to put $10 million more into fleet. I feel like we need to listen to our directors, right, in DPW and public safety, and we need to we can't fully fund their fleet, which is 20 million, that's what they're saying, but at the very least, give them half of what they say they need, right? And then in ongoing, I personally think that we should create a trust fund, much like our other trust funds where they have a known 10 million a year at base, right, so that they can plan. So with that,
Can I just take that a step further? That like we just need a much larger pay-go contribution to our capital budget. It's normal for cities of our size to use a sizable chunk of debt to fund our long-term capital projects, but we're doing it at more than a 10-to-1 ratio of bond dollars to pay-go dollars, and that is not healthy.
okay.
Like, we don't need to just spend it on fleet, and like we can use it for other stuff that
Well,
like
so-
you could use bond dollars on, and then you're in a much better shape because you're not taking out so much debt every year.
So that's sort of what, already, let's just say where we are with the budget that we have, without additional revenue, would we be able to put $10 million in additional funding into the fleet?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question. The budget as proposed includes $10 million for the fleet across all sources of funding. We would not be in a position to double that to 20 million.
Okay, so we would not be able,
No.
and I feel that we should. We've been told very clearly by,
Yeah.
right?
I understand your point, and I think that is a valid perspective. We took the position in preparing our proposal that we would continue the incremental progress towards that number, that we were not in a position to do so in 2026. But yours is also an equally valid position, right? But it would require a tax increase to do that, as you've proposed. So I'm not arguing with your point. I'm simply saying we took a different course in what we put on the table.
Can I ask, and if you recall, what did PLI request this year for demolitions?
About 9 million,
About 9 million. And what did they get for demolitions?
less than that. I can pull it up. It's the combination, as Kelly mentioned. There's some CDBG dollars that will come online next October, and then also pay-go money. The PLI plan, as I'm pulling it up, it was thoughtful. It was, this is how we address issues right now, that in such a way that over time we won't need that amount every single year, right? It was catching up on what hadn't been done, what hadn't been demolished or deconstructed, and moving it into kind of that level. And now I'm just gonna look up the number, unless you have it. 3.1 million in pay-go.
No.
Total?
Yeah, a little over 1 million in pay-go.
Your mic's not on, sorry.
I'm sorry.
So they got 3.1 and they requested 9.
They got 3 point. That's say it again, David.
Yeah, they got a little over 2 million in CDBG and a little over 1 million in pay-go.
Okay, so,
And they asked for 9 million in pay-go.
yeah, so just because our vacant and abandoned property issue is severe, right? In some areas more than others, right? Would we in the budget as it is now, would we be able to give, let's bring it up to 7 million additional dollars to PLI?
No. I'm happy to continue to answer these in sequence, and please do. But the budget proposal that we put on the table included cuts in operating expenditures in order to achieve balance. There's the operating result is slightly under $2.5 million. So there's very, I can't think of a category where
Right.
we didn't give someone their full request where we could make that whole.
Right. We've also talked a lot about improving our litter management and our clean and lean, and just boosting capacity, even potentially hiring a team that is dedicated to litter management, including a litter management coordinator at DPW, so that we can. These are just in post-agenda conversations that we've had. Would we have any funding to do that without increasing revenue?
We wouldn't have.
So, for example, there was one thing that was proposed by our Clean Pittsburgh Commission was to pass an ordinance requiring clamshell closed lid garbage cans, and then providing those cans, or at least one, which we got a $9 million estimate from DPW to do something like that.
Something like what you've just described, no. There is funding in the existing budget. It's not new positions. That's what I was just looking over to see. But we have the budget contemplates DPW continuing to grow its work in both the enforcement of litter through anti-litter inspectors and in taking on weeds and debris enforcement from PLI, as well as continuing the work we've seen in dramatically increasing the number of clean and lean cases we're taking on. So the resources necessary to continue the current improvements we're seeing there remain. We did not cut those, but the additional types of expenditures you've just described, we would not be able to do.
Okay, so, even if we said 9 for the cans, and I know that the incoming mayor has expressed great interest in enhancing our out-of-school time services at the city, right? I'm just basing that based on his campaign. That's also a priority for me. Is there capacity in this budget to, do that?
Not to grow our activities in that space, no.
Right, okay.
Beyond what currently exists within the Department of Parks and Rec.
Right. Which again are like part-time, those are for the most part part-time positions, right? Like after-school positions. And there's also summer camp positions. Those can
The
be
majority of the expense ultimately is in wages and benefits
Right.
for part-time staff, yes.
Yeah. So, is it safe to say that an additional $41 million in revenue would set Mayor-elect O'Connor up to sort of, take the reins and
Yeah.
continue I will say this, continue the good work that I believe that this administration has done?
I appreciate that question and the way you've put it. The presentation that we gave at the beginning here was primarily aimed at addressing what have been repeatedly discussed as areas of concern or deficiency within the proposal and its solvency itself. And so that's where we have been today, talking about why we think that the gap between council's concerns and what is actually in the budget is smaller than has previously been thought. To provide additional quality services to residents like what you're describing, yes, it is without question, it would be necessary to raise additional revenue, right? And so if council were to decide to raise taxes, I think that it is the types of proposals you're describing there that would be my recommendation for how to spend those dollars, right? If we're asking folks to contribute more, there's more that we can do for them in those ways. I think that the extent to which new revenue is needed to address existing expenditures within the current proposal is a lot smaller than has been previously discussed. But yes, if you wanted to do all of the wonderful things that you just described, Councilwoman, it would require additional revenue of the size that you're describing. There is no way to expand our offerings in that way within the existing framework we've proposed. We simply believe that we can achieve what we have proposed to achieve within the resources that currently exist.
And I also want to ask too, and you know, I'm going to ask you to speak for the departments, but in your conversations with DOMI and PLI specifically around our permitting processes, right? Which we get a lot of, we always hear about how it's too slow. Is that a personnel issue, right? Is each inspector have so many permits that they need to review, or?
I think the driving challenge to addressing the concerns we hear most often are process issues, not personnel issues, and issues that we have endeavored to tackle, and I believe have made significant progress on. I won't claim that we've achieved everything that could be achieved, but we've made significant progress on in the last 4 years in reorganizing the way in which they are reviewed. More personnel would help in clearing some remaining bottlenecks, and directors have, rightfully for that reason, made requests, not just this year, but every year. They've made more ambitious requests than what we've ultimately funded, even as we have invested in more staff in those places to make that improvement. It's a combination of personnel and process improvement. I believe the process improvement work is primed to continue in the budget that we proposed. We did not advance a proposal for more personnel.
If we had the funding for more personnel at PLI and maybe DOMI, I'm not sure, would that make it easier for us to provide the type of concierge service that we are hearing from large-scale developers that they really would like to have, that like one-on-one contact in the department to get their projects done?
It's not, frankly, that kind of one-on-one concierge service is not the model that we've been pursuing in the process improvement. That is what many folks have asked for, but it's been our finding that is relatively inefficient, right? That the best way to actually meet the public interest in making this process better is to make it smoother and faster and more consistent, rather than a bunch of one-off individual connections. So I would not advise, if there were more resources available for personnel in those departments, I would not advise that they be put towards that kind of concierge service except in specific circumstances. We did a pilot around that with affordable housing development in the Department of Planning. I think there are examples where it could be helpful. But to answer your question directly, if council or an incoming administration does see the one-on-one concierge approach as a way to move forward, just a factual statement, yes, that would require more personnel.
Okay. I'm just trying to think. So, yeah, I mean, I just, I've been on this council for 3 years, and I can't count the number of times that I have heard members talk about how we need to increase revenue. And I recognize that we need to increase our revenue base, right? Like our real estate, right? With our downtown properties, et cetera. But the reality is, and I know that that's a top priority for the incoming administration, right? Oh, I had another question. Would we be able to put, let's say, another $2 million a year into the land bank with the budget as it is currently?
The projected surplus at the end of next year is $2.4 million. So there would be and it's higher than that in every other year in the 5-year plan. So from just an actual cash basis, would it still be balanced? Yes, I imagine we would need to run some calculations to say whether that would affect any of the other fund balance or debt service calculations. So maybe not. That would be something like that would be at the absolute margin of what we can do and leave essentially zero margin for error at that point.
So, I mean, in that sense, we would have to choose, right? Either work on, doing like a trash can pilot or doing the land bank. Is that what you mean? I'm just trying to clarify.
As a
Is that what you mean?
practical answer to the overall point you're making, Councilwoman, I think it's well made that could we do 2 in a literal technical sense perhaps, but we couldn't do 2.5. So I think your point stands. I just wanted to give an accurate answer.
What about another thing that I know is a big priority for the incoming administration is small business support, right? That's something we have heard over and over and over from the incoming administration. I believe we have $100,000 allocated now to the URA for small business support.
I believe that's correct. We're double checking the figure, but I believe that's correct.
That's maybe one project,
Yes.
maybe, or like 3/4 of a project in a coffee house somewhere in the city. It's not a lot. So I just want to, the reason that I'm asking is taking a step back, and I am frustrated at the, and, are we falling off the cliff? Are we not? Is it balanced? Is it not? Right? It's regardless, right? Additional revenue is what, as much as the taxpayers do not want to hear it, and as angry as it may make our constituents, the reality is that we have not increased our taxes in 11 years, and this additional revenue is what we need to do all of the things that every member at this table is passionate about different things, right? Whether it's projects within their district, whether it's citywide things, whether it's future economic development, right? Every member at this table, and that, I will say, at the end of the day, I believe is what our constituents remember is the stuff that we get done. It's the work that we get done. It's not the arguments that we have. It is it's that when our cycle comes around, it's the list that we are able to show that says, look, this is all the stuff that got done on my watch or on our watch, right? And so anyway, I'm gonna leave my comments at that. I think it's clear. Again, what I've proposed on the table would be an additional 41 million. And I think that it would, that would be a good thing for the city of Pittsburgh. I think that would put us in a much better place. And this is not an issue of one administration versus the other, right? This is just about being able to do good work for all the residents, right?
Yeah, I'll maybe just to summarize what I've been saying in response to your questions. Our argument is that the amount of additional flexibility needed to meet the expenditure proposal that we have made is minimal.
Right.
We believe it's balanced. We acknowledge that it's a tight margin for error. If council desires greater cushion, then there are changes around the edges that are necessary to achieve that we're happy to discuss. But we also acknowledge that we did not include new expenditures to improve services in any of the categories you've just described. And in fact, in a few areas, trimmed spending by eliminating positions or non-personnel spending to create space for a resolution to the common level ratio conversation that Councilwoman Gross and I are having to work out. So there are paths forward, and I'm not taking a position, I'm just describing them. One path forward that we see is to adopt a budget. Again, we're happy to entertain a discussion around modifications, but it is relatively similar to the one we've proposed, which does not include new spending, which includes some reductions, and which provides space and time for the larger macro trends on our revenue to work themselves out. the course to pursue if you want to add new spending to the budget is to pursue new revenue. And that's the decision I think you all are contemplating right now.
Yeah. So, in any, just to summarize, the Gainey administration feels that it's tight but doable, that we can eke by with this budget, that it works. The controller and perhaps our budget director, and I speak for you, does not feel feels that it's too tight and it's too right and I feel as a council member that we for what at the end of the day is, I'm not going to say it's modest, right? It looks like sticker shock, right, for the voters, and the concept is upsetting. But what we know at this table is that an additional $40 million of revenue could mean that we can actually do all the things that we talk about doing all the time at this table and amongst ourselves, and sort of, so that we don't have to fight each other on the thing that we want, right? Like this, helping our various our various directors in our committee do the work that they want to do. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Charland.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your leadership during this time. Thank you guys for being here. I want to start off with the will of council that we sent you yesterday, asking for your assistance in helping with modifications to the budget in areas that we think are deficient. Will you be able to help us solve those problems before the end of the year?
We're happy to discuss what your desired changes are. Yeah, we're happy to engage in that conversation. Whether we'll be able to help you do it depends on more specifically what you're looking to achieve.
Will you be able to submit a revised budget to us with the knowledge that you have through this whole process, or are you going to kind of wait for us to move here?
It was our reading of the wording of the will of council and our intent to either through direct discussion or review of proposed amendments, work with council on changes. We don't intend I didn't read the will of council to request a new submission. That's not our intention. No.
Okay, so that's not something you'd be willing to do.
No.
Okay. So I also want to ask. I want to move directly to talking about the bond or our bond rating, which is something that I know you guys have cared a lot about here. Do you believe with the budget that we submitted now, when we heard so much about why our bond rating has improved because of our ability to maneuver when we faced a crisis, the way we've been able to move things around, we've been able to budget effectively. Do you believe that with this budget that our bond rating will drop in future years?
No. Go ahead. The answer I think for both of us is no.
Yeah, I would like to hear this.
So the factors that have led to our improved rating have been a combination of underlying market conditions. There was a record permitted building activity in the city of Pittsburgh in 2024, $1.6 billion in new construction, which is the highest that it's ever been. That's a significant factor that is reviewed by the ratings agencies and has been a big part of all of our conversations with them. The growth in our reserves since COVID and their relative high water point, even as they in this plan are shown to be reduced, has been a factor. And I think in the way in which the ratings agencies do and have looked at them, I think that I don't see it going down in the immediate term. In general, as you yourself, Councilman, have pointed out, much of the way in which those ratings are determined is based on the ability to raise taxes. And whether council decides to do so or not, based in this conversation, that legal ability remains, and that's also a critical factor. Patrick, you probably have things to add.
No, I was going to say the same thing about the ability to raise taxes. We know we have, and we have walked through the list with the agencies in our most recent go-rounds of what can the city actually adjust in terms of tax rates. It's not a very long list. A lot of it is set at the state level. We don't have the power, through our own design to adjust a lot. One of the things we do is real estate millage. And they noted that it exists, right? We have capacity still. We are not at the top millage. We are nowhere near the top millage, so that ability exists.
And I'm sorry, there was one more factor.
Yeah, I'm done.
One more factor I wanted to add is that the continued improvement in the health of the pension fund is also a factor in those conversations and that assessment, which this budget preserves the maximum payment, basically the minimum obligation plus the actuarially recommended amount, the parking asset, and then we make whole any difference. So for those reasons, genuinely, Councilman, no, I don't anticipate that this would have a direct downward impact on the rating next year.
So, I mean, regardless of what year we're in, we always have the ability to raise taxes. I mean, short of getting out of the Act 47 ICA situation,
That's right.
we've always had the ability to do that. So, if you're saying that the rating agencies are giving us a high rating because we have the ability to raise taxes this year and we will have the ability to raise taxes next year, we will kind of always have that ability.
That's right. I don't think that is a thing that changes the rating annually. I think it is maybe a foundational factor in their assessment. The things that have changed their assessment recently has been the robust activity as reflected in those construction numbers and the continual annual improvement of the health of the pension asset, and the ways in which taking a decades long view, the ways in which the reserve balance has improved. Right? Those are the factors that we believe are central to their changes in perspective, and they would remain consistent. Is in the next round that we're going to be looked at.
We did burn through a good bit of our reserve fund last year. We're anticipating to burn through more of it in this year. In years to come, we will continue to burn through it. If that's an important factor going into these, into these bond ratings, I can't see how that isn't something that, that is not trending in a good direction for the agency there.
It could in the long run be an issue. It wouldn't be an issue next year. Is that maybe the answer I'm answering, the way in which I'm answering your question? I return to an earlier point, which I believe I may have made before you came to the room. So it is part of our overall contention here is that some of the areas in which we've heard the most concern, namely overtime and utilities, are based. That concern is based on part of the information, and that therefore this budget is, as proposed, is balanced. That means that that plus the way in which our 5-year forecast shows that we can sustain that level of activity provides time and space for future developments in the disposition of the common level ratio case and the potential reassessment to inform future decisions. So for us, in assembling this budget, there were 2 pain points. One was 2026 because of the debt retirement that's happening there and the need to thread a bit of a needle on operating, knowing we had a very high debt service payment. If you see in the presentation, the operating result is only $2.49 million next year, but in 2027 it increases to 26.7, right? So we had a thread a needle there, and then it gets very tight again in 2030, progressively over time, presuming that real estate tax revenue continues to tick down on the pace that we're showing it, which is the only thing we responsibly can do until there is a date known for a resolution to the wider property tax challenge in Allegheny County. I don't believe that issue will go to 2030 unresolved. And this forecast would look very different, and our overall financial picture would look very different if, for example, a reassessment is complete in 2028. At that point, the downward trend would stop. We would see a 5% bump, and the end years of the 5-year forecast would look very different. Additional adjustments may be needed annually up to that point, but a year from now, council could be facing a very different 5-year forecast if a resolution to that question is reached in that time. So I say all of that to mean we believe we are coming to you with those two arguments as to why the proposal we have provided is compliant with the requirements and sound, that we believe we can provide satisfactory answers to some of the areas you all have rightfully questioned, and that it provides an opportunity for other factors to influence the overall scale of decisions you'll make in the future. That to solve for all of those problems today without that information could lead to much bigger adjustments than may be necessary. However, just going back to Councilperson Warwick's question, if there are other things to pay for, that's a very different question.
I'll say, can I add real fast? So we started 2024 with 208.5 million in the fund balance. We started 2025 with 203.2. So it was not a massive difference. We've projected starting 2026 lower, but we won't know really until February, March, April as we finish the ACFR.
And if I recall, I can look it up as we're talking here, but we go down about 30 million every year.
Correct.
30, 35.
Correct. That for projections, and then those get reassessed every time we actually know what the actuals look like.
Yeah. So, with that, I guess, again, I think that there's a lot of, assumptions that I don't think would pass, the rigor of, an outside agency here. One of the things you kind of mentioned here was this idea that we have this vacancy allowance, and when we subtract that from the overtime overages, that it's actually not that bad. It actually ends up being you by your math there. I think you were saying about 3 million was the problem. I think that might have just been one department there, but
no, that's citywide, and
okay.
And it's a vacancy allowance is the accounting tool
Sure.
we use.
I understand what vacancy allowance is.
I was saying that for further clarification. That's the accounting tool we use. What we're actually comparing there is actual savings. So how much we are coming in under budget on regular wages, and setting that against what we're coming in over budget on overtime. So if you take the 20 million over budget on overtime, subtract the 16 million 16 and change that we are under budget on actual wages, it works out to $3 million and change citywide projected for the end of this year.
Why don't we budget precisely?
We can't budget precisely for either of those things because the only way to budget precisely would be to know that we would have every single position filled every moment of the year, right? So
we have I understand why we have a vacancy allowance. I get that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
What I don't understand is that why we can say this is not a problem when we have we have an overage and we just say, well, the vacancy allowance takes care of it. We're lying on paper. We're lying to the public.
Okay, I do understand. I misunderstood your question initially. I think that it would be perfectly acceptable to reflect these numbers with an increased vacancy allowance and an increased budgeted amount for overtime. We have historically, the way that we have historically done that is we start with baseline as in the previous year and make adjustments. Pat, you might be able to speak to that more precisely. It is, we could do that. The net effect would be the same, but we could do that.
If the net effect's the same, but again, it's shoddy record keeping if that's what we're doing.
The actual record that we look at and what our external auditors look at is what is happening with the audited financials. The budget sets up the legal framework. People will not miss a paycheck because the budget isn't there, right? There is not going to be a scenario where someone who's doing work is not getting paid for their work. And what we are trying to balance is this legal framework and this guide We know that the budget has to be a snapshot. We know that that there has to be variance with the way it moves and how it comes to fruition.
So
If we had to follow the budget line by line every single day, the city work wouldn't get
But
it.
what a huge variance. You know, what that's
So, Councilman,
that's not like a, you know,
Councilman, we would happily work with you, with the council budget office, to reflect a different distribution across regular wages, vacancy allowance, and overtime, including in the 2026 budget. We have no objection to doing that. We've had some preliminary discussions about that.
but actually, but why didn't you do it? I'm not concerned about like what you would be interested in doing. Why haven't you done that yet? Why wasn't that the document you provided us, the document that was accurate?
Historic practice and the way that we've calculated those things. Ultimately, to your question about auditing, this approach has been audited in each of the prior years that are listed here, and it has not been a finding, right? So it is not an auditing issue. It is not an accounting issue. And so it has not been a priority to make the calculation conform exactly to the way you've laid it out, but it is something we're happy to address because it doesn't have a net impact on the actual outcome.
I guess, yeah, I think that what's the purpose of showing a budget if we're not, you know, if we're not going to show the public a budget that we want to stick to, what's the purpose of this whole exercise then? It all washes out, right? That's kind of what you're hearing. Is it all washes out? Doesn't really matter.
I wouldn't agree with that as a general rule. I would say that when we think about these things, we think about them within the categories of expense, right? For us, the category of wages and benefits, which includes premium pay, is one category of expense. We would not want to have that category of expense be widely inaccurate. Within that category, some of these individual allocations, the variance is part of how we experience them every single day, and so we're less attenuated than you have been in asking this question to whether it shows up in savings on salaries versus premium pay. The net impact is not, frankly, is not an auditing finding, and so our attention is on other issues. You know, we pay very close attention to this category of expense at a slightly higher level of the way it fits into the budget. But again, happy to adjust it.
I mean, I think if we're working to restore trust in our government, trust in this body, trust in the budget, I think providing numbers that are realistic, that are precise, you know, should be our first goal there. And maybe, you know, if it's something that hasn't shown up in the audit yet, then, you know, I encourage that to be something that's looked at. When our bond council, when we go out to bid for that, when is the next time that they come up, or that we go out for bid on that again?
It would be this spring.
This spring, after this year, after we issue debt in January, or
No.
Bond council was just renewed.
just renewed?
I'm sorry, Councilman. Are you asking about the contract
actual
or when
council
the contract.
Yes,
Oh, I
yes.
apologize. I misunderstood you.
That was just renewed. City council approved it in October.
In October, okay. How long did we approve that for?
3-year period.
3 year. Okay, thank you. Where can I find in the budget where we've allocated to pay back in the job tax? What department has that under?
There's no allocation in the proposed budget for refunds associated with the facilities usage fee, as that is subject to litigation, the extent to which individuals are entitled to a refund. Refunds would hit any refunds that are awarded based on the continued resolution of that question for the actual litigants would hit as a negative revenue in the Department of Finance. But we have discussed this question at length with the law department, including the team that litigated the case, as well as the finance department. And the payment of further refunds is still very much an open question.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so it's just something we didn't budget for. We're hoping and praying on that one. What So we have 2.75 allocated for AFSCME, police, Teamsters.
No,
How,
that's
no.
not correct. 2.75 is the amount that I believe that Director McDevitt acknowledged and briefed you all on in the HR budget. We have also, given the number of contracts that are in motion at this point, we included cushion for those contracts in the salaries and benefits line items for the individual departments where those folks work as well. So the actual number is much greater than that number.
What is the actual number?
I don't feel comfortable saying as they're ongoing negotiations.
So we have it listed in the salaries, but
It is incorporated into
Okay.
the overall salary number in those departments.
yeah.
But because we're actively negotiating with those unions, that's not a number we prepared to say on.
Okay. I don't want to look it up now, but I guess I could figure that out from what the number is last year to the numbers this year. Okay. The draft is this year. What have we budgeted for additional costs? We believe, we've already paid out $1 million, kind of in an unprecedented way that, to visit Pittsburgh. What have we budgeted in addition in terms of what we will be on the hook for, with medics, fire, EMS, or
Some individual departments made specific requests associated with the draft. I believe the vast majority of which we honored in the proposal. We prioritized honoring individual requests that were associated with the draft. I can't recall if there were, one or two that didn't fully make it in. As relates to the biggest category of expense, which would likely be overtime, $300,000 increase was included in the DPW budget at their request. On the question of public safety overtime, we had hoped to reflect the conversations around state reimbursement into the budget when it was published, but due to the delay in the passage of the state budget, we were not able to incorporate those figures. The state budget has since passed. The allocation from the state for the draft was actually greater than had originally been proposed, $10 million. We have already asked that $1.5 million of that be reserved for public safety overtime reimbursement, which is the estimate produced by the Department of Public Safety as to what they would need to be reimbursed for in overtime. So whereas if the state budget had passed on time, we probably would be able to have that under contract at this point and reflected in the budget. Unfortunately, that was not possible because of the state budget delay. But I'm confident that there's $1.5 million in that allocation that will be available to us that can be expended to reimburse for draft-specific overtime costs. So that would lead to that being a net neutral impact.
To clarify, the state directed those funds to Visit Pittsburgh as the tourism agency, not to the city. So that would be the contract.
That's right. We'd have a contract with them, which is the discussion we began this week now that they had confirmation of that from the state.
Okay. So we gave Visit Pittsburgh money, the state gave Visit Pittsburgh money, and then somehow they're going to try to find a way to make us whole here.
It's in the working budget for the draft for reimbursement to us.
And they will make us whole.
That's what we have asked them to do and what they have placed in that budget. Yes.
Okay.
I'm saying this in the particular way I'm doing because again I would have liked, and I believe we would have been able to achieve a signed contract to that effect if the state budget had passed sooner.
Yeah. And maybe if you were going to take another, run at this budget, that's something that you could include there. Does the controller's office have access to your budgeting software?
No. No.
Why is that?
The controller's office does not have a role in, as again, the controller herself has routinely stated or repeatedly stated in discussions at this table, in managing expenditures. They have the accounts payable function, which is reconciled through J.D. Edwards, and they of course have a role in certifying revenues, for which there's an established process. The non-executive agency that has oversight role in expenditure management is council, and the council budget office does have access to that information.
I mean, again, I think in this kind of trying time, it would be helpful to have her have more of an insight here. We kind of all should be pitching in here. I guess the other last question I want to end with is, as we're talking about such trying times here and such a close budget with, again, what I believe to be relatively shoddy accounting here, why is it that the administration did not propose a tax increase or, staff reduction on the way out? Why is it that you were so committed to not raising taxes when, kind of everyone else is saying that this is something we need to do? What is it that you're seeing that we're not seeing, and that's why you didn't raise taxes?
That's what I've addressed throughout the balance of this hearing, Councilman. That's why we've taken pains to answer why we see the questions around overtime, utilities, and other factors differently than has been the discussion here. We didn't propose a tax increase because we believed that with the 50 vacant positions we did eliminate, and the other non-personnel spending that we proposed to cut from the budget, we were able to produce a balanced, compliant budget. And at the end of the day, we then determined that under those circumstances, we did not deem it warranted to propose a tax increase. That is, I acknowledge that the margin for error in that proposal makes it a worthy subject of debate that's happening right now and subject of discussion. If council, as Councilwoman Warwick has done, wanted to propose a tax increase, but it was we looked at that. That was part of the calculus that we were examining scenarios in the early days of putting this budget together. We ultimately ruled it out when we were able to produce a budget proposal that didn't require one.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think it is a worthy subject of debate, and it is something that I wish that, a debate that you would be willing to engage in. But
we are.
I see that that's not happening, so.
Yeah, that's not the case at all, Councilman. As I've said countless times in the course of this hearing, we are here to participate in this discussion. We offered to begin this discussion in October when we provided the original proposal. We are here now to have this discussion and happy to have it. We were happy to engage in this conversation.
At the same time, you also think the budget is balanced, so,
Well, you're asking me why we proposed what we proposed. I'm going in the response to that question, or in questions where you ask why we made the proposal that we did, I'm going to provide the rationale that led us to that conclusion. That doesn't mean we're not prepared to discuss alternatives, but that's not been the question. The question has been, why did you do this, and why do you think that this is acceptable? And I'm providing answers to inform a discussion around changes. I've been saying since the beginning of this hearing that we acknowledge Council's clear desire to discuss ways in which additional room for error or cushion can be included in certain targeted places, as well as the desire.
Or we can meet basic services. That we can make sure that our ELA is funded properly, and that we've got correct funding for the land bank and demo and all those other things that we've neglected, in this time here. So. With that, I really do. I'm really not interested. Thank you for being here, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I want to find common ground with you because, and I want to believe that the budget is balanced. I really do, because I'm not in the camp of wanting to raise taxes, and I'll tell you why I'm not. I've been pretty public about it. I feel that we've misspent, squandered, however you want to say it. When I say we, I don't mean the administration as much. Both the administration and council, we approve. Proposals come from you, we approve. First, in the way of affordable housing, okay? Let me ask you, how much money, including the bond, have we put in the past 4 years into affordable housing? Do you have a raw figure for, not counting the HOF, but just what we transfer from ARPA money to the URA?
Sure.
For affordable housing purposes?
Patrick can probably create a more precise number, but I'll start with, we spent about $40 million in ARPA on affordable housing. Then there are the annual payments we are making associated with the affordable housing bond. Those would be the direct city including ARPA city resources. As Kelly presented on earlier, a significant portion of our CDBG funds also go to affordable housing, but of course those are not directly, transferable with other forms of funding. So, and then there is the HOF, and there is the investment that in affordable housing we are able to secure through competitive grants and other activities that occur at the URA, but direct, in the city budget, not CDBG restricted. That would be in the ballpark of, I'm guessing the 40 million in ARPA plus, it's what, 2.5? What's the, what I can't remember is the annual
Let's just
payment.
use the total allocation of $62 million of debt payment, okay? Not counting just this year. It's
Sure,
just,
that's fine.
what we've committed to, right? So we've
So that'd be
committed
about
to
100 million.
62 million. So we're over $100 million in affordable housing.
Sure.
I don't know of a unit that's been built in my district, I will tell you. So maybe there is that I'm unaware of. Maybe in the way of rental assistance and things like that nature. Is that?
Yeah.
What would come to my district, I guess? What benefits from that?
There would be and again, I don't know the exact locations of all of these things, right? But the way in which that would manifest itself most likely in your district is the individual type, homeowner assistance and things of that nature, because it is largely zoned as lower density residential, whereas most of the major projects are higher density residential projects. Those are possible in the Brownsville Road corridor in a relatively limited number of places in your district. Of course, the Berg Place project is advancing, which is exciting, but that would mark probably the first of that type or scale development in your district that I'm thinking of an example of.
Right. And I don't mean to downplay the benefits and the wonderful things we're doing with the HOF and affordable housing in general. I think it's really great. Until I'm forced to say I have to go ask my constituents for a tax raise. Because when I look back on it, even though those are really good things and a lot of people have benefited from them, they also, whether it's Habitat for Humanity, whether it's City of Bridges, whether many, many foundations that apply for those funds and that are granted rewards, they also go to our big foundations. And I think in many ways, the City of Pittsburgh, we have been acting like a foundation or like a philanthropist of some sort with affordable housing. I understand the importance of it. For me, the city's role was always in zoning, planning, where we can make it easier for developers to build affordable housing. But for us to take that on at the expense of our financial security, and that's why I can't come to the grips to say, yes, we need a tax raise, because I feel we've been irresponsible. I feel the administration and council has. On top of that, we have the comprehensive plan, which, $6 million there, $30 million here, and I just felt like if we had been more responsible over the past 4 years, and again, I'm accusing both of us, we wouldn't be in this position. So I went really hard to get to the point where I feel like what you're presenting us is a balanced budget, because my preference would be, I'm realistic, okay? I see and I understand Councilwoman Warwick's proposal. It's an easy way out, I feel, I would use that as a last resort. I would like to take time, and whether it's passing the budget that you put in front of us, and then if I have to take that on next year, and if we just decide that we can't meet what you were saying was a balanced budget, then I would entertain the fact of raising taxes. But not until then, I feel like we need to do everything as a council. Turn over every leaf, make every cut, look at pots of money.
Which may I respond?
Sure.
So I think obviously we disagree on whether the expenditures for affordable housing have been wise expenditures. But I think that at the end of the day, that's secondary to your question, so I don't want to dwell on that. As it relates to the overall position of the budget and the plan that we have presented, I would again say that it is our perspective that the spending plan we laid out can be met by existing revenues, and that much of the concern about whether or not that is true has been driven by incomplete accounting for the sources of funding that pay for things like overtime, utilities, and other things like that. But going back to my conversation with Councilwoman Warwick, it does not provide the level of funding that we would like or others would like in the fleet, and in some other areas it leaves the margin for error close. I think the judgment call for council is about those questions. And again, I will say that we proposed a budget that we believe meets the mark in terms of not requiring a tax increase to be functional next year, understanding that it included some spending reductions and some tough choices about deferred needs. Whether council wants to accept that approach or take a different approach is what I believe you were all debating. And again, we're happy to participate in reviewing, discussing, and refining those different approaches.
Okay, so I want to go back to what you said as far as our philosophical differences to affordable housing. Philosophically, I think we're on the same page. And you said you see it's wise that we made those investments. And I'm just going to tell you my philosophical difference from you is, okay, let's say we put $100 million into, just as a round figure, into affordable housing, right? From the ARPA money. That money could have been used for our fleet. Now, don't you think if we could turn the clock back that we should have probably put $40 million into the fleet and $50 million into, or $60 million into affordable housing? Wouldn't it have been the wise thing to do?
Patrick, how much of ARPA did we put into the fleet?
More than 15 million.
Right. So
How much?
It's more than 15 million.
Okay.
I think the question of, I think both are important. I think both were worthy uses of ARPA funds. And I think that reasonable people who agree on the objectives of the city can have reasonable debates about whether 15 and 40 versus 20 and 35, what the exact right mix is. And each taxpayer, each public official, each council member from different districts that face different needs will have their own different sweet spot if they got to make the decision alone. So in that sense, I don't think that we vary dramatically in our thinking. I think I look back on the investments that we made and am satisfied with the way that they were distributed across the two categories. But if it was 20 and 35, I probably would feel the same way, right? I think those are reasonable conversations to have. In the end of the day, though, no, I do stand behind the allocation choices that we did make.
For affordable housing?
Yes.
Okay, and what, other than being good-hearted, what residuals do we get from investing into affordable housing, and not including people's lives and helping people get into affordable home?
That is the benefit.
That is the benefit, right?
Right, yes,
So
it
there
is
is no financial benefit to the city of Pittsburgh, other than they may be paying taxes on a house that they buy. I get that, but that number's, we can't even compute that number at this point.
It is not it's not a revenue generating endeavor in the same way that trash collection is not, in the same way, right? I mean, I personally, frankly, Councilman, and again, I'm not looking for an argument. I don't think that's the right way to look at the question. Right? The question is, can the Pittsburghers of today afford to remain living in Pittsburgh tomorrow in a world where, not just here, but nationally, the cost of housing is going up dramatically and is the driving factor in displacement. I believe that's a legitimate public service in the full suite of public services that we offer to have a countervailing impact on the market there, but it's not. It is. Yeah, it's
And
not
I do
about.
too. I don't want to sound like I don't have a heart here. Okay, I do, but again, I feel like we act like a foundation. In many ways.
I agree that you do care about those residents, and that it's not your intent to say you didn't. The way you asked the question is the way I responded, because you are proposing a hypothetical. So I'm not questioning.
Well, it's not hypothetical. Well, it's clear as day. I mean, I'm saying our investments in affordable housing have not helped our financial situation in the city of Pittsburgh. Where if we would have purchased a whole new fleet, would have we wouldn't be talking about raising taxes today. That's the difference. That's the two differences. That's all I'm saying. We could philosophically, I have as big as heart as anybody. Believe me, I want to make Pittsburgh affordable for everybody, but not at the expense where we have to put it on the backs of the homeowners. That's all. So
Again, I think those are legitimate perspectives.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the reason why I'm doing this, I don't mean to rehash old arguments, but it really is the fact that is why I can't sit and face the people in my district and say I need to raise taxes now, because I feel we should have been more responsible with decisions of the past, whether it's the comp plan, whether it's the bond, whether it's the money we gave to the URA. Okay, so those are the reasons, and that's why I so want to believe in your budget. Okay,
Sure.
And I want to be able to look to the public and say, no, we really don't have to raise taxes. And if we do, I want to do it next year. I don't want to do it this year. I don't feel like I'm prepared to do it, because I want to turn every leaf over. I want to find every means of savings that we can before we go to the public and say, I want to raise taxes.
On the question of savings, again, I'll just reiterate, we have proposed in this budget the elimination of 50 unfilled positions and roughly $3.5 million in further non-personnel spending reductions, which was part of how we produced a proposal that we believe is balanced. We believe those to be, it produces challenges, right? There is pain for the departments that would be losing those positions in not having them. So there is a sacrifice being made there, but we believe that is a level of spending reduction that can be implemented without eroding our ability to provide services at the level we're providing them. Again, that is a question ultimately for every council member to reach their own conclusion on.
Okay, so I've explained my reason why I am on the team of raising taxes, and I hope that we don't do that. I hope we find other ways. I know there was a pretty grim picture that was painted to us yesterday, and I mean, it is kind of like we can't go back. We can't reallocate monies that we already spent and are accounted for.
Well,
so we are where we are.
But and again, part of our intention in the presentation we provided today was to fill in what we believe to have been some gaps.
You made me feel a little bit better about taking a stance for not raising taxes, and I want to feel even better about that. And I'm hoping I can. So tell me where the big difference is. Okay, now we see. Obviously, and I know we talked about it at the table, but just to reiterate quickly, we don't have to get into details, but we're guesstimating, let's just say $20 million in premium fees. And you're saying with the vacancy allowance, with the police, just the police, right? Vacancy allowances? No? Oh.
It's if you look at the...
So where are we off? We're guesstimating $30 million. Where are the main... Okay, we got premium pay, we got...
If you look at page 7 of the presentation that we provided, you will see in 2025 a variance of 16.17. You will see $20.9 million in a overage in premium pay, right?
Right.
But you will also see $16.175 million in savings on actual wages beyond budget, right? So that means we came in $16.175 below under budget in that regular wages, $20.9 million over. Simple subtracting one from the other, that means that the actual variance is $3.21 million. That's where I'm.
Yeah. So what we're projecting, and what we have been saying, what we've been talking about is
you've been
we're $20 million in the hole. And you're saying, no, it's really only $3 million with the...
If you offset it with the savings that are in the same financial category, yes.
Which we can do, and we will do, right?
Well, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything.
No, right,
because it's one bucket of funds that pays for both things. So the actual amount that sub-account is out of line with budget is only $3.2 million, right? And so that's simply, I believe the council has been discussing the $20.9 million number, and I'm not denying that is a real number. What we've been endeavoring to do today is to provide the rest of the picture, so that the decision you're making is informed by the whole set of circumstances there. That's all.
Okay, well, that's a little encouraging, I will say, for me, as to taking a stance where I don't want to raise taxes. What about the negotiations now? You know, we're in
The labor
negotiations.
contract
yes.
negotiations?
I don't mean to get into details. I mean, just, we
I
have to
can-
figure.
I can provide a general.
Okay,
update.
yeah, we have to
We-
figure money there, right?
As we said, we have included in the budget proposal funds that would allow us to incur additional costs. We have projected where we believe those negotiations will land, and included cushion for them both in some reserves in the Department of Human Resources and in the salary and benefit lines of the departments where those represented workers work. We remain hopeful that we will reach a resolution with the Teamsters and AFSCME before the end of the year. Those negotiations are active and ongoing even as of today.
So those monies are factored in your 26 budget.
That's
That
right.
what your guesstimation, we'll call it.
Again, we can't, as with any labor negotiation, we won't
No.
know the outcome
Right.
until we reach an agreement. But
But realistic in your eyes.
in
What
our eyes,
monies
we
that
have
you set aside.
factored in a reserve to meet the costs of where we expect those will land. As Patrick mentioned, because the FOP contract has gone into arbitration, we know there won't be a resolution to that case likely until May at the earliest. But there are still, funds included in our proposal to account for what we expect a arbitrator's award could be.
Right, okay. Pittsburgh Water, we have an $11 million bill. Is that for this year? It was for this year.
I'm expecting to receive a
25?
$10 million bill
$10
from
million
Pittsburgh
bill from
Water
this year?
over
Right,
the
right.
weekend. Yes.
Right. Now, when we had Will Pickering at the table here not too long ago with the budget hearings, I know the PUC kind of mandated that they bill us,
That's right.
right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you have a history with Pittsburgh Water.
I was there when that mandate came in,
Okay,
yes.
is that right? Okay. So, mandate is one thing, but does Pittsburgh Water have the ability to say, oh, well, we forgive you of your bill this year,
No.
City of Pittsburgh? No?
They cannot forgive it. They cannot forgive it. Again, Councilman, this, from our perspective, is not, our ability to actually pay the bills that we owe is not something that we think we're going to confront. We expect a $10 million bill. We have offsetting city charges that go back to Pittsburgh Water to reduce the amount of that bill.
Okay.
We have then some funds in the general fund budget. We believe that that is resolvable for 2025. In 2026, we have proposed $8.5 million budget for the Pittsburgh Water payments because we are trying to transition out of the true-up process. We believe, again, that this budget is adequate to address our Pittsburgh Water costs.
All right. We're on a roll here. You're making a believer out of me. Not quite yet, but we're getting there. Okay, the liquid fuels trust fund, is that right? Okay, explain what that is.
We've received monies from the state as part of the gasoline tax, and we receive
Okay.
about $8 million. It varies every year,
Right.
and those funds are in a segregated account, and they must be used for things related to streets maintenance, streets operations. So right now, what we do with some of those funds is we do reimburse the general fund a little bit for salaries for those people who are plowing the roads, taking
Okay.
care of the roads, paving the roads,
Well,
things like
that's,
that.
I was going to say, how do you tie that into the streets, but I got
Yeah,
you, so
but-
it's like Public Works.
Yes,
Yeah,
Public Works and Zomi.
the eligible. I'm sorry, I interrupt, but the eligible uses of liquid fuels tax funds are for our operations in managing the right of way, right? And so some of it we use to offset some of the cost of paying folks who do that work. Some of it we use for things like paying the bill on streetlights. But we couldn't use it. We couldn't use liquid fuels money to pay the electric bill in this building, but we can use it for
So
streetlights.
we use it to purchase salt, though?
Salt.
Okay.
Yes.
And how much do we set aside for salt?
So the funds roll over year. It's one of the benefits of having it separate from the general fund. I talked to Director Hornstein this morning. It varies based on what's actually happening with snow. They like to leave a balance and expect around $3 million worth of salt. Could be higher, could be lower. But the funds that carry over also help, when it's more than $3 million.
Yeah. So we're fully loaded on salt right now. We anticipate carrying funds over in the account year over year for future purchases this winter. But we also think that we can, we think that we can address the variance that exists in, with those funds and other funds.
Okay.
So we're not concerned about the electric bill.
That's fine. Okay, so finally, my last question really is, and again, I don't know what to make, again, like Councilwoman Warwick said, we're going back and forth as to, we think there's a $30 million deficit, you think we're on budget. I'm kind of somewhere in between right now,
Sure.
I will tell you, and in between, to me, means that I don't think that warrants a tax raise. I think we could make cuts, do things to remedy that, and then if we always want to raise taxes next year, or if we need to raise taxes, I should say, we could take that up then. But so the last thing is, I asked you recently, we met about the municipal courts building. Again, that we own that place. I'm worried about the HVAC. I'm worried about the roof. I'm worried about a lot of expenses there. It's 30 plus years old. And if something goes on it, the courts have to be there. We are going to have to foot that bill at this point. But I asked you to get something in writing from the county saying they will burden that cost.
It's an ongoing discussion.
Okay. Right. But as it is today, this winter, if the HVAC goes, it is our expense. And we don't have any commitment from the county to pay for anything on that.
Unfortunately, the original arrangement as relates to that building was, and it was an unfortunate series of circumstances that none of the folks who were involved could have fully understood. When the building was built, or at least started to be built, we managed the Pittsburgh municipal courts.
Oh, I know.
So we had-
Believe me, I know the whole stuff.
I'm saying this
I
for the
got you,
benefit
yeah.
of someone
Understood,
watching at home.
understood.
And so we incurred the cost and retained the ownership of the building. When the judiciary reorganized the way it was managing the courts in Allegheny County, eliminated the Pittsburgh municipal courts, moved those responsibilities to the district magistrates. There was an agreement that was never written down with the Rendell administration that would have provided us with resources relative to the building. That never materialized, and we've been holding the bag. We are working to rectify the situation. If there were an emergency in the building, we have improved our collaboration with the courts administration for how they could move to alternative space or remote work, so we wouldn't be in like immediate urgent repair situation most likely. But we do need to continue to work on that, and you have my commitment to continue to work on that, all the way up through January 5th if necessary.
I appreciate that. And how much have we spent in maintenance on that place this year? Do we have a figure on that?
No, I don't have it.
Okay.
We don't have an itemized number for that building.
It's safe to say, first of all, the place is a wreck. And I'm glad, I don't want to put money into it. It's not going to be ours. I don't want it, the building. Why would we go sinking money, good money into a bad investment? I want to give it to the county. I want them to take ownership. If they don't take ownership, I want to sell it. Let's just sell it. I'm sure David Honorado, maybe the parking authority would be interested in it. Knock it down,
Haven't
do a
had those
surface lot,
conversations, sir.
So, and that could generate cash for us. But at any rate, right now it's sucking cash from us right now. And it,
Yeah,
great idea. Are you
that's
kidding me?
not something we've explored or discussed with them. I have been involved in discussions with the county and the courts administration, which they understand the untenable nature of this arrangement that's in the history here, and I believe we're working together in good faith to find a resolution. But I don't have more to say on that now.
Okay, I understand. I just think we're just keep kicking the can down the road on this. I appreciate your work you've done on it. When that major expense comes, I don't want to have to approve any money for that place. I think it should fall on the county. As of now, they could stick it to us. We know that. That's where we're at. So that's why I keep bringing attention to it, because I know the big expense is coming with that. Eventually, being in the building business, the place is 30 plus years old. All those big item tickets are about ready to go. And then they're going to look to us so they could hold court. I'm like, well, we barely have any employees there. Why are we footing the bill? So, okay. That's it for me. Thanks. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Councilman.
Thank you. Councilwoman Kale Smith, I know you're on a bit of a time crunch. Sure.
Do you mind, Councilman Wilson? Okay, thank you. I know you were waiting here longer. Just when we talk about the differences and what you're seeing where the gap is and where the our budget office, what do you think that number is? Did you say that? I didn't know.
Again,
if you said
I don't believe that there is a gap. Right, for the reasons that I've laid out today, when there's been a discussion of a $20 million gap around overtime, I've attempted here to explain why we don't see that challenge. Right, we believe we acknowledge we are probably slightly over $3 million off this year, and we've made a corresponding proposed change in next year. So the information that went into our proposal, we would not have presented a budget that we thought had a gap in it. So I don't believe there is a gap. I believe that achieving balance in our budget comes at the cost of the position eliminations and cost reductions we proposed, but I don't believe there is a gap. I believe that if council is uncomfortable with the small margin for error which we left in a couple of categories, which I understand that position, I couldn't put a number to it, but I think that the number you are solving for is likely much smaller than $30 million. It would take more discussion to understand exactly what it is. That's all I'm trying to say.
So I would, first of all, thank you all for your work. I know this is not a great time, and I know it's very difficult to continue working with all the current situation, that everyone's going through. But I also don't think it's fair. I don't want to raise taxes, and I definitely won't vote for a 20% increase. But I mean, if we absolutely had to do something, I would like to have a conversation, and make sure the public understands. But I don't think it's fair for a new mayor coming in who didn't have anything to do with any of this. When he was here, our budgets were okay. I don't think it's fair for him to have to wear it either. But the whole idea is of a tax increase is where I think we should look at ways we can cut back, and we are talking about some ways that we can freeze some things and maybe hold some things up for a little bit and maybe cut some places. And I do have some ideas of where we can do those things, and I've talked to people a little bit about it before. And I think some of my colleagues are also thinking the same way. So I'm looking forward to those conversations, but it's not like I really want to do any of this stuff. I wish we had money to do everything. You know who we need here? We have the wrong Coghill here. We need Carrie Coghill with her financial consulting firm here. No, Anthony, you do really good. I'm sorry.
Again.
But,
Councilwoman,
but you know what I do want to ask real quickly though? Where are we with? We were talking about doing like advertising on different parks or buildings and different. Where are we with that? Because that would bring some revenue.
Yeah, we don't have there have been I'm forgetting the name.
Market-based revenue opportunities.
Yeah, that's it. I couldn't think either.
Yes, we are not extensively engaged in any market-based revenue at this time. I mean, there are the limited examples of, I think, like the role we have in the bus station ads and things like that. There have been proposals at times to put advertising on other city assets. There is no currently active program doing that.
So you know what would be a good place to start? Maybe with the salt domes. $6 million salt domes. One of the things that they asked in Elliott all the time is, could we get Dick's Sporting Goods on, because it's near a ball field and it's shaped like a ball. And so they thought if they could just get Dick's Sporting Goods to paint it like a baseball and then
I mean, we do have standards that allow for sponsorship. I'm not saying that this is there are limited examples where sponsorships are permitted, but we don't presently have a program by which Dick's could pay for that. That is something that has been considered in the past. It's not an issue that's really come up much in the last 4 years, so I don't have a ton to share with you on that. Pat, I think.
I know the aesthetic design of that salt dome was very heavily discussed during this design process over the course of, the Art Commission, Civic Art Design. But what I can do is we can talk to Director Gula. MBRO was formerly in the Department of Finance. When I started here, there was someone in the role who was exploring opportunities. Those can get very egregious very fast, so I think that would be very important for the administration and council. And we did have conversations, with you in particular, I believe. It was, Chuck Durham was in that role before he moved up into the mayor's office. But there's definitely some opportunities. I think about it when I'm in Dormont and see their ball fields and banners and things like that.
Yeah, we have it all around us because we surround so many boroughs. So I would like to look for that as a possibility and what we can do.
It's not something we've explored either here or in general in the past 4 years, but I know there has been work done on it that can be.
And if we could just seek,
into.
hey, we're looking for a sponsorship for,
Yeah.
give them some idea, and then maybe you'll be surprised what we get back.
We do see sponsorships for special events.
Right. They do a
Beth
great
Bliss and
job,
her
but they
team
can't take a 5% increase,
Correct.
decrease on their budget.
Correct.
They just can't.
Correct. And those specific events, a lot of companies like that visibility, but it's worth considering. We'll look into it.
Okay. So that, and then any other ways that we can cut back and think of other revenues before anybody ever even, goes down that road of raising taxes, I think is something we should all discuss. But I have to leave. I have another event I have to go to. But Councilwoman Strasburger, I want to thank you. You've done a great job chairing all these meetings and serving as the chair. I just want to thank you for all the work that you've put into this too. And I know I give everybody a hard time, but I do appreciate you, okay? So,
Thank you, Councilwoman.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the work you do.
For the record, I love your
Thank you,
salt.
Budget Director.
I love your salt dome idea.
What'd she say?
We'll paint it as a soccer ball. We'll put a Dick's
Oh, yeah.
Sporting Good, and we'll be perfect.
Maybe the Riverhounds will sponsor
She has me
it.
blocked.
We're onto something.
Thank you all.
You said it, not me.
We'll move on to Councilman Wilson.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for being here. Congratulations on closing out with a win
Thank you.
with the soccer team.
Thank you very much.
And it's a good way. It's
Yeah.
a good, yeah.
I'm appreciative of how much, I don't think I really deserve the congratulations just as a fan, but I appreciate you all for bringing it up. So, thank you.
Super fan.
We've never seen him
We've
happy.
we've been hearing about it for some time. You are the reason.
So that's certainly not true, but thank
Yeah.
you, Councilman.
All right. Yeah, thank you all for going over this. So I have some questions I've been writing down here. Let's go back to the beginning when you said, Director, you said artificially depressed. I think you were referring to
The common level
the
ratio.
common level ratio. Can you explain why you think it's artificially depressed?
It is, the number is going down annually as a result of not a reflection of what's happening in the market, right? But as a result of a court order that is ultimately about an administrative dispute, right? If that number were, if there were a reassessment and that number were reset to 100% and it wasn't on a court-ordered schedule to go down, we would be projecting modest real estate tax growth every year. That is why I'm saying that the intervention of that very particular set of legal circumstances has a negative impact
Okay.
on real estate tax growth. I could have used a different term, but that's what I meant by that.
All right. In the 1.6 billion in 2024 of construction costs, that's based on
Permit data.
permit data that PLI gets, basically the numbers that the construction.
When folks are engaging in construction activity, they report the value of their project, and it is based on
Right.
that.
Yeah, I see the chart. I believe it's on a city website somewhere.
Yeah.
I was looking at where it moves. Do you have 2025 numbers?
I don't know that. I remember that number because when we did a final reconciliation, like that's the last full year, excuse me. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe the last number I heard for 2025, though it wouldn't be a complete year, would be about 1.2. So it is slightly below that, but still a very large number. And I don't know whether it's lower because of difference in construction activity, which can obviously vary from year to year, or just because it wasn't for the full year.
Are these numbers based on closed permits?
I believe they're based on the initial permit application. But they are reconciled so that the same permit is not counted twice. You know, if that number appears on multiple stages in the permit process, they make sure that they're only counting it once. So it may be for activity that is still ongoing.
Okay. You mentioned 50 positions that were eliminated in your budget.
Yes.
Do you have the list of those?
We've provided that. I don't have it with me right now unless you can pull it up, Pat.
Peter, does that match our list that you presented
So
yesterday?
what we've provided to the council budget office is a list of currently vacant positions. We can pull the list of positions that were trimmed.
But is that the same list that?
No, what I showed was the current list. So what we showed was positions in the general fund that are budgeted for next year that are currently vacant, and also that aren't union, and
Okay.
also some other stuff.
And your list is?
The ones that we already took out in the proposed budget. So these would not be the same lists.
Can't cut them because they're not in there.
Yeah, we've already cut those 50.
And we have that list. you're saying.
I can make sure you have that list.
I believe we sent it when we sent the budget over, but we will send it
All right,
again.
I'd like to get that list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. All right. And then just want to get right to the questions that everyone's been asking, but I have to ask them for myself so I can understand it. All right. So go back to this chart on 7. So these are wages for all union and non-union, the regular wages.
Yes.
Okay. Premium pay is overtime. This is overtime for everyone that's available for overtime pay.
Yes.
And we keep on looking at 2025 line, but really we're
You could look at any year.
passing a 2026 budget. So these are the proposed numbers that in 2026. What is the
So let me answer why we are looking at.
why are we keep looking at 2025?
Because 2025 is a year where we have actuals, and it is a year because we actually spent the money, and it is the year in which many questions about overtime have arisen. Right. So we're looking at that because that is often what is used as the benchmark in the conversation, or at least as I have heard it. Right. That's where the $20 million.
Yeah, I think we've been going. I mean, for my in my conversations, I think I've been going off of what you've proposed for 2026. And
Okay.
so when we look at overtime, because that's the budget we need to pass. So I'm trying to.
Then let me simply say it this way, right? When you look holistically at regular wages and the savings we've achieved there, and premium pay and the overage that exists there, and you net those two things out, for 2025, you get $3.2 million. We have increased the proposal for regular wages, the vacancy allowance, and overtime in 2026. So we believe that it lands us in a similar place. We've accounted for some of what led to the overage this year. And not reflected here is what I was discussing earlier about state reimbursement for draft-related overtime expenses.
So here's where the disconnect is for me. This number 41.4.
Yes.
This is like this being higher than 38. That isn't the narrative that I've been hearing. The narrative I've been hearing is that the number's been lowballed, and I've seen it for myself on a spreadsheet in the budget. And
I can't speak to that. We are proposing more in premium pay in the budget for next year.
Peter, because we went over this yesterday, where I asked, are we taking the average of the last 3 years?
Yeah. So
and that's why we think that their estimate is off.
Like I said earlier, we're going to pay around $24 million to fire for premium pay, and they're overstaffed. There's no reason to they're not working so much overtime because they don't have enough staff. They're working so much overtime because that's how much overtime they can get away with working. So I don't think they're going to cut back on that through the goodness of their heart. So there's no reason to think that that number's going to go down.
Okay, so I'm sorry, you're saying 24 million.
That's just for fire.
But you're estimating.
Yeah,
that's a different number than what
they budgeted 17.5.
Okay, 17.5. So this one, I just need to break this down here.
Yeah.
And I apologize if everyone's already gone through this, but I think we keep on going back to this sheet, and this sheet isn't what I've been going off of. The conversation, the narrative that we've all been discussing. So why is that? Why is Peter in 24 and you're in 17.5?
This goes back to what we were discussing with Councilman Charland, right? The way in which we've produced these figures relies on and if you look at every year, not just 25, but every year here, we are coming in significantly under on regular wages and somewhat over on
because of the
premium
vacancy.
pay. Vacancy allowance is a piece of that, and
What's the other piece?
There are savings beyond vacancy allowance for a variety of reasons.
Like what?
Uniform, longevity.
Okay.
There are other categories
Okay.
of
Gotcha. Other
salaries
things
that
come
are
along with the
also
job.
part of
Gotcha.
it. Yeah.
Correct. And so the net impact is what you see at the bottom. In 2021, The net variance there was slightly in deficit, but of about $250,000. In 22, 23, and 24, the net is a surplus. This year we are in deficit about 3.2, which can be absorbed in the balance of the rest of the budget. And we think we are correct. That ultimately is the scale of problem we feel the need to correct for in 26 across this entire category of expense. We could achieve that, and again, I said earlier, but we'd be happy to work to achieve that, at least in part. Well, council could propose it yourselves, or we'd be happy to work with you, however you all prefer to do it. We could achieve that by having a higher premium pay budget and a higher vacancy allowance. From an accounting perspective, that would correct this issue without, in our opinion, having to require an additional spend in this category.
What are the charts that I've been seeing? Is that in the budget somewhere? Someone keeps pulling out that shows 17.5. That's just a more itemized version of this.
Yeah. So the 17.5. If you just look at the budget page for fire, it shows what they have budgeted for premium pay.
Yeah, okay. And that's been done for all.
Police is 15 million.
All right. So after seeing the calculation here, Peter, are you
like, you could totally, so the way that you make this work
do you have a new awakening with this, or what?
I mean, to a degree, sure, but the way you get here is you know that you're going to pay another $6.5 million in premium pay. So instead of showing that, what you're showing is, I'm going to have 50 laborers, but I'm only going to hire 40. And then we don't have to pay 10 of them. And the 10 that we don't pay, we're going to put towards premium pay. So, like,
the only
that's how you make it work. You just don't hire everybody else you need and everywhere else.
The only difference I would put to that is that we have not halted hiring, right? We have not intentionally prevented the hiring of vacant positions. They are posted regularly. The process takes longer than I would like. At the same time, I would expect that if we filled more of the positions, then the overtime utilization. Your point about fire is well taken.
Yeah, fire is the one outlier.
I would say is an outlier, but I think you would agree that we see
police will pay for itself.
And I think you would agree that relationship works as you would expect among laborers and other folks. So we could adjust the distribution of funds across these categories of expense, and in most cases that would close the gap, because it's not true that we are intentionally hiring less than the number of budgeted positions as a matter of policy. It is in practice we never end up with a full complement. People come, people go. We finish hiring a new laborer only to have another one leave, and we just simply never hit full staffing. Right?
Okay.
That's really how that manifests.
All right. So with this variance here, this estimated variance, what would it be for 2026?
We can't estimate variance for a year where we don't have actuals. Variance measures the difference between the budgeted amount and the actually spent amount. There is no actually spent amount in 2026, so we can't estimate variance.
Yeah, I realize you can't, but I just didn't know if you had a projection.
No, we don't have a projection for that.
Also, keep in mind they eliminated 50 positions, so that's 50 less to not fill to then plug the gap for premium pay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to water. Explain to me again this issue where we see 8.5, but we're expecting 10. Run through that again with me.
Sure. So when we proposed the budget in November, we used the best full year data we had, which was approximately $8.4 million for 24, right? We know now, literally I found out from Deputy Director Kevin Paulus yesterday, it's going to be closer to $10 million, right? So they're probably, we know that there was no rate increase with Pittsburgh Water since 2024. What that means is that is usage for the city of Pittsburgh that has increased. So next steps would be as we discussed, for Public Works to go in and start to analyze. What our Councilwoman Gross put it well. Are there inconsistencies with the bills we are receiving, but also from a usage standpoint, are there places where there are leaks or where we don't need to fill up something as frequently? So next is moving into the performance side of things to look at that.
Yeah, so we believe we'll be able to pay 25's bills within the existing budget. And the 8.5 estimate for 26 was the most reliable information we had at the time we proposed this budget. I think if we assume it will be 10 again, which we don't have to assume because we can look at why usage went up and take proactive steps to bring it back down. But if we presume it will be 10 again, that is still within the kind of the range of stuff that we can handle administratively, in the budget.
Okay, so I'm just hearing that you put 8.5 because you thought those would be, and then recently you're finding out it's more because what's the one word?
Because we got a more up-to-date bill. We used the
All right.
2024 total in August,
Okay.
and that was the most current information.
Okay.
We now have the 2025 bill.
Also on top of that, Patrick brought this up, so this is another point to them, is the true-up costs. It's going to bring that 10 million down closer to 7 million, but there's also about $1 million we pay every year.
Yeah, what's this?
To Pittsburgh
What's this,
or Pennsylvania American.
transition out of the true what?
The true up. So
True up.
the cooperation agreement with Pittsburgh Water called for an annual true up, and it is complicated. We compile all of the things that we, the city of
Why
Pittsburgh,
do they call it true up?
because what we're doing is we're truing up costs that each party has paid. So we are paying on behalf of Pittsburgh Water pension, right? We make our contributions from the general fund into the pension fund. State aid offsets some of that. But there are other things that we do on behalf of Pittsburgh Water, street sweeping, DOMI permitting. There are things that we pay or Pittsburgh Water does not fully pay us for during the course of the year.
Okay.
They pay a lot of the permits, but a lot of them, are longer term projects and they don't pay them until the project is done, something like that. Right. On the flip side, now with the way that the PUC changes, and this co-op called for a gradual increase of us paying for water usage, sewage, things like that.
Right,
so
thanks.
they cover that, we cover our stuff, and then every year we have to
I
work
got you. I know what
together
the true. Yeah, I get
to
it
get
now.
there. And the timing of it, there's a good
Just kept
chance.
saying it. I'm like, I got it.
It's a bill reconciliation.
Okay,
process.
I get it. Yeah, yeah.
We do
I
the
wanna
same
move-
thing with the city county
yeah.
building.
All right, I want to move on to
Yep.
liquid fuels. So, how does this account get replenished?
We receive monies from the state every year after they audit it. The state collects the monies from their gasoline tax, a portion of it, and it's divvied out to all municipalities.
Money from state after say again?
Gasoline tax.
Okay. All right, I'll check that out. And we were paying what with that again?
Part of the cost of electricity, specifically the street light.
Anything in the right of way.
Well, anything with the right of way is eligible, and we use it to cover streetlights as well as some plowing operations, salt, a variety of expenditures like that.
Okay. I had a couple questions about the bond, in terms of how we've been, putting in for, like, we've been putting in projects for the bond. I want to hear from OMB why we want to go the route of what the county has done in the past, and which is putting in the like some vehicles in a bond ask.
Yeah, so for the bond, we're looking to have, for kind of the suite of things that we're paying for, a useful life that's equal to or longer than the debt service on the bond itself. So traditionally, we've gone out for a 20-year bond. So we've used 20 years as kind of a rule of thumb for any of the assets we're spending bond funds on. We want to make sure that it's going to last for at least that debt service.
Yeah, I've looked into this and I want to have further conversations, but my understanding is that what they're doing isn't wrong because they take the average of all the length of each project, and that overall average is
You can. We're
Is-
actually, sorry.
is 20 years.
Yeah, we're kind of already doing that with paving. We're getting caught up on paving. So that whereas when I first started 10 years ago with the city, you could be pretty confident that you were not going to touch that segment of road with another 20 years, right? Before you went to repave it again.
I mean, unless you're PwC.
That's true. Fair point.
Or
Yeah, but
Pittsburgh
now,
Water, sorry,
yeah,
if you're listening.
yeah,
I always feel so
I'm
bad
sure
at-
they are.
I always feel so bad offending them.
yeah. Through Domi's work with their prioritization of the streets, though, we're starting to see that we're getting to back through some of that backlog is cycling back around again. So we don't have hard numbers on how much that is, but we know that's kind of lurking. Additionally, a lot of our vehicles don't meet the standard useful life due to weather, road conditions, I'm not sure what, but fire apparatus, for example, don't last the 10, 12, 15 years we're expecting either. They're lasting 7, 8 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I get that but I'm saying there is this other model out there.
Yeah,
And so I'm trying to understand, like,
we don't utilize that. We
Why
don't
not?
utilize that model. We don't.
why not?
It is correct.
They
to
also
say-
do a 2-year.
It is correct.
I don't know if they're currently doing that, but in the past they have. Sorry.
It's okay. It is correct to say that they're not doing anything, illegal or untoward. I don't.
Yeah, DCD signs off. Yeah.
Yeah. We view it as a best practice to use bond funds for things. We view what Dave just said as a best practice, and so we utilize bond funds in that way, and then utilize other funds for vehicles. I
Okay.
think so.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers on that. So I know that I've asked Pete, so we'll talk about that, and trying to extrapolate that out, what that looks like, because I think it's worth doing since we're in a pretty dire situation here, and I think the public would understand. I mean, we all go to the dealership and pay our car off in 5 years, or if we're gonna buy a car. And so I just don't know what that looks like. Does that make sense to the public that we would do that? So
The other thing to think about is the true nature of bond. You don't really want to be using bond funds for recurring everyday maintenance style expenses, right? So if we have vehicles that we know are part of just a core delivery service, they're not a one-time transformational project, it's gonna get really expensive to start using bond funds for vehicles. You're paying 40 to 50 cents on the dollar in debt service for every dollar you're taking out in bond.
Yeah.
So the vehicle that was $1 million is now $1.5 million over the course of.
We would candidly like to move in the other direction and have taken incremental steps in that direction. I would rather pay for more vehicles out of the operating budget and then reduce our debt service, right? Or but that's a much bigger. There are several ways to solve this problem, and the considerations are primarily financial.
GFOA would tell you that goes against every best practice, and it would also very much hurt our bond rating. For
So
using,
it would add more to the operating budget. too.
yeah.
I
it
don't
did.
know. I'm hearing counties went up.
I defer.
okay.
I genuinely on
Yeah.
that issue.
I mean,
We would have to have this argument here, but I'm just like,
I'm saying on the GFOA
saying,
on the
like,
GFOA
there's-
issue, I would defer to others. But
And again, if it's shorter term bond, then it's going to increase your debt service over the next 5 years. So if you're looking for a quick win, you're still going to that's going to shoot way up over the next 5 years, and then you're going to have to pay for that out of your operating budget, which means you have less stuff for literally everything else we're talking about. We don't have enough money for
what would shoot up?
your debt service payments.
Yeah. Okay. And then so why don't we do a 2-year then?
In terms of taking out bonds once every 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
we have kind of a dead period then, right? So the first year, let's say 2026, we're taking out a bond for both 26 and 27. The 27 capital funds would just sit for an entire year. And we'd be paying debt on them without getting any of the benefit of spending it and seeing it out on the street.
the way the county achieved that transition was by doing 2 issuances in 1 year, and we have not as a different way to get on a different schedule, and we simply have not. That's an idea that we've been discussing in the entire time that I've been here, looking for an opportunity to pursue, asking our financial advisor about it. We've not identified a year where there was a prime opportunity to make that transition in a way that made financial sense to the city. And I should say, I believe that conversation was happening before the Gainey administration started as well. I think it is something that is worth looking at as a long-term goal when you consider how it fits into the schedule of planned projects, the city's debt service payments, and the limit on debt service payments. What Dave's saying, that the year where we're paying interest on money that we're not spending, you have to really kind of find the sweet spot moment to make a transition like that, and we haven't found it. But it's not a bad idea.
We went down that route 2016, 17?
Yeah.
2017,
15,
18,
16.
and it proved to not be as practical as we'd hoped. The money sat. So some of it is project delivery, right? As that grows stronger and stronger, it becomes easier to move monies.
Okay. Just want to bring up that great topic since we're in times of thinking outside the box. And I have some other ideas, but I'll save that for a different time. My last question is, who would be, if right now, if we move 301 into the OMB office like proposed by I'm not sure who actually proposed it, but it's on your budget, and it's also shown as a minus in the mayor's administration. Who would in the OMB right now would oversee 311 manager?
As with a
what's that, right?
As with several other positions in OMB, they would report to me.
Okay, yeah, nothing. I just don't see how they. Procurement and Kelly. I just have real questions about 301 being an OMB, and just the broad topics that OMB covers. I just, constituent services.
I understand this was a topic of discussion at the hearing yesterday. I think those folks answered those questions to the best we're going to be able to answer them. I understand it's an ongoing topic of discussion.
Certainly the management side over the budget side.
Yeah.
I feel bad for them. They keep getting moved around. All right. Thank you for your time today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues for all the questions that they've asked, because they've asked a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask as well. So, and I want to say this is really helpful to daylight some of these conversations. I actually think although yes, we could have been having these conversations behind closed doors, we're having them in the public light, and that's helpful for the public to understand along with us what we're grappling with. So appreciate everyone's questions. I appreciate answering them and laying it out here. I'll also say before I launch in that to questions that I want to, I maybe differ from Councilman Coghill's position slightly. I still do think we're solving for 20 to 30 million. I do think that we will find a common ground to get there, and I don't know what that'll look like, but we're continuing our conversations. That said, I want to be clear in asserting a couple of things. One, it's a confluence of factors that have contributed to this, and it has not happened. It is not unique to Pittsburgh. There are cities across the country that are freezing salaries and freezing hiring and freezing programs and raising taxes. And I also acknowledge that we have not raised the millage in 12 years. That's multiple administrations, not just one administration. I also acknowledge that despite our will of council, there were multiple county administrations, well, at least one, but prior to this one, that did not reassess, embark on a reassessment, a second reassessment. And we also have a state legislature that is the only one in the country that does not force a mandatory regular countywide reassessment, county by county. So that's what we're dealing with. It is not one leader's or one executive's doing that got us here.
Yeah, Madam Chair, could I very quickly add something to your point there about reassessment? I think it is important to keep in mind, right, that as you said, I don't fault Allegheny County necessarily for being in a challenging situation with this question. Conducting a reassessment costs $40 million, right? It is, and Allegheny County, much less so than the city of Pittsburgh, is more directly impacted by reductions in federal funding and cascading effects of federal funding on state funding than we are, because they receive a lot more of their funding. So they're facing they're facing significant larger revenue reductions than us because of those federal and state changes. At the same time, they would confront a $40 million one-time expenditure to do that. So I say that just to underscore your point that the real sustainable resolution to this question comes with a clearer state mandate to reassess regularly and perhaps assistance with the resources to do so for counties if we're going to get into a stable place for the long term. This particular example is likely to be worked out ultimately in litigation, but you know, it's easy for me to say that reassessment is important because it would solve a structural challenge in the way our revenue is calculated, and that's true, but I don't have to figure out how to pay for the reassessment. So we should all be mindful of that factor, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Absolutely. My point being, it's a confluence of factors that have brought us here. It's you know, it's everything from living in a post-COVID world where downtowns, and for us that means contributing to a shrinking or a consistently lowering common level ratio. That means grappling with a post-ARPA world. Like, it's everything. So I want to acknowledge that. That said, I want to ask some questions. We are contemplating property tax increases. At any point when in creating this 2026 budget, were there internal discussions about it? And even with the budget that you presented us and your defense of it today, we can all agree it provides a slim margin for error. If you did not have internal discussions about a property tax increase, why not?
We did.
Okay.
At the beginning of the process, as we were reviewing both the requests, the projections as they appeared at the time. Right. This isn't an entirely linear process, right? The process of assembling an initial budget proposal really looks kind of like a funnel with a lot of information coming in and a lot of parallel conversations and exploration. So tax increase was on the table in that as we were waiting for other numbers to solidify. I'll just say a tax increase has been on the table in every single budget we've proposed because we don't rule anything out until the numbers solidify. So it's been ruled out at some point in the process each year as the numbers come together. In this case, we elected not to propose one because we saw the ability to propose a path. Again, I'll agree with a narrow margin for error, but a credible path, and elected to make that proposal upon reviewing all of the various options, with the OMB internal team, then ultimately with the cabinet and the mayor's executive team and with the mayor. So we selected a course from a variety of potentially viable courses, and we ultimately determined it wasn't necessary. But yes, the trade-off is it is a narrow margin of error.
Okay. With regard to overtime and premium pay, I guess, just shifting a little bit from the conversation we've had up until now, other than higher levels of staffing in some of our public safety bureaus, which we know could impact this, is there anything that the incoming administration could do from your perspective to contain those overtime or premium pay costs so that it becomes less chronic as a management issue?
I think that there are the answer is different bureau by bureau, right? I think in police and EMS, it is a question of filling vacant positions. In fire, it's something we attempted to address in the most recently bargained contract. We're seeing that those efforts we think they help, but they've been less helpful than we had originally hoped. And I think continued work both at a management level and then ultimately in future contract negotiations will be necessary there. Pat, you've really been closer to those if you want to add anything.
The Bureau of Fire is an interesting case because of callbacks, right? There's mandatory staffing, so we know how many firefighters are on at any given moment. On one hand, that is helpful. We know how many firefighters are on at any given moment. But on the flip side, when someone is returning to work, as a callback, it's different from their regular rate. So what I would encourage the next administration to do is really dig into, we had these thoughts and assumptions as we moved through bargaining. So what was off about them, right? So revisit the ideas behind the proposals that were made and negotiated to see what what didn't come to fruition? Was it implementation? Is it HR, the way it's calculated? You know, how did we get to this place where what we thought was going to happen didn't happen? On the EMS side, I think that Chief Gilchrist has a clear vision for the Bureau, and we have seen, I'm sorry that I'm going to say it, John Atkinson is going to fight with me. Combo units have been working to reduce forced overtime, right? So what does it look like if you have medics and EMTs together on an ambulance, not just to reduce forced overtime, but perhaps when there's another need? So I think that could help there.
I think if I could just quickly add there, we saw that potentially reducing overtime overall. What we have seen it has been successful in doing is reducing forced overtime, but not as successful in reducing overtime utilization overall. But we are seeing recruitment improve, and so we think we'll be able to fill more paramedic positions, which will produce less overtime shifts.
Continued conversations between Public Works, DOMI, and our public safety bureaus. You know, we realized there was kind of a gap in information with the Panther Hollow Bridge. What does that actually mean for our response times? And it took a while to get to the place where we said, oh, we have to put another engine on, right? So how do we react to that? So making sure that those bureaus are communicating with, you know, up through the Director of Public Safety into DOMI and Public Works. There's also always going to be situations that we can't account for, like the storm at the end of April, which did increase a lot of public works overtime, but didn't rise to the threshold of county, state, or federal support.
Okay. Moving on. What was the methodology behind the estimated reduction of health benefit expenditures from 60 million September budget to 58 in the November proposal?
So that is working through some of our external from the general fund accounts, you know, what could be supported additionally from the VIBA or from the external OPEB trust fund. In this case, between September and November, it was working with Jen Gula and having conversations with the OPEB trust, though they have not voted on it, to support retiree benefits using those external funds from the general fund.
Okay, is that the same reason for the 2027 drop from September to November as well? It goes from 67 million to 63 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's one of the things is, of course, that is not a solution for all 5 years of the plan, but there is a good amount of funding in that OPEB trust fund that is, you know, can be used per code for offsetting these costs for retirees. That's a group of employees, former employees, that gets smaller. You know, new employees no longer have access to retiree health care. So that is a shrinking group of population.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's also a rebate built into the outer years that was very confusing to me and Kirsten at first because we just didn't ask questions. But when Director Kellerman was on the floor yesterday, we pulled her into the office and asked, like, what is this? And it's just some additional savings that are worked into that for the outer years.
Yeah. And that's for active healthcare. That's correct.
And I can't remember if that was one of the things that changed from September to November, but I do know we were going through the process, working with our providers to look at the plant benefit changes, and I know some of those adjustments were reflected as adjustments between the two drafts.
It was, right?
Yes.
The decision to move from 3 carriers to 2 happened in between those documents.
And that resulted in a more competitive proposal that included the rebates.
Okay. The budget proposal anticipates a $163,000 or $164,000 surplus for the current year, which is down from 3.2 million surplus anticipated this time last year. Are we going to have that surplus at the end of the year? A surplus?
I think so. And one of the things that Councilman Wilson was talking about, why do we keep talking about 25? Why do we keep talking about 25? Because we're so close to the end of the year, right? The 25th pay was loaded into JDE yesterday, so now we know there is 1 pay left. And we have a good sense of the second pay in December is probably pretty close to the first pay in December. We also know that departments, as we hit end of year, there's less being spent because the controller's office is closing the books, right? So purchases are winding down, P cards are winding down, explanatories are winding down. So we know that there are fewer opportunities for things to be spent. We know that departments are still able to encumber funds and open orders, but at the end of the day, that cash balance does not change. That will reflect perhaps with our rollover dollars into 26, but at the end of the year and the beginning of the year, the money is in the general fund bank account, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
I'm optimistic.
And I know there are reconciliations that happen in the new year, all of that. But I guess I'm asking in part because I want to make a point. We shouldn't have to rely on the most sophisticated accounting within our OMB and with other brilliant people who work for us to be playing with this margin of error in the future years. And that is why, despite the opposition from the public, obviously, but from some council members who, don't want to allow for every possible both expenditure, cuts to expenditures and revenue generation on the table. It's why I think we need to look at everything, because we don't want to be in this position next year. We're doing okay. Like, we've made it work. We don't want to have to be doing that every year.
And no one wants it to happen. The budget has to be balanced. If the actuals end up in a deficit, which did in 2021, that's the only time it has in the past, since I've been here. It happens. That is what the fund balance is for. That is why we use those and replenish those to make sure that we have the ability to maintain.
And to that point, we want to continue to not only grow, like double our fleet, but also have a strong fund balance to meet the code and to be able to have that when it's truly an emergency, like it is in 2021.
And the only thing, just to come back sort of full circle, I believe there is a sort of a window of reasonable discussion around the size of the margin for error, whether it needs to be larger than is in our proposal and how to achieve that, or whether we hit the right balance. And I think that those are conversations that are worth having right now, and we're open to them. I think I just want to add if you look at the 5-year forecast that we have here, right, the margin for error is very narrow in 26 because we have the additional impact of the debt retirement.
Yep.
It then opens up significantly at 27 before trending down again, right? So part of our philosophy was simply like a narrow margin for error in that 1 year, the second of 2 years that are constrained by the debt cliff, followed by some breathing room with a longer term challenge to be resolved, the resolution of which may be external, right, is why we felt comfortable recommending that margin of error next year. It would be different if, it was equally tight in 27 and 28, just in the thinking that we put into this.
I understand, yeah.
But again, that does not mean we're not open to adjustments that makes it a little wider, if you will, next year.
Yeah, it's a level of comfort, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Yeah, it's what each of us is comfortable with, and us as a whole, as a body. Okay, I have two, I think, fairly easy questions that are a little bit different that came up during, as I was thinking through this. One is there, Kelly, this is for you, is there some delay that is from CDBG or in the CDBG funding that is different from any other year, that is
Not normal. Well, this year was.
Is that a result of everything that's happening in Washington, and that's why there's some confusion from some of the beneficiaries?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking at Pat. Do you want me to just go there? Go for it. All right. So there were a lot of things different with the new administration coming in D.C. They put in a lot of different requirements into federal language into the contracts. We have to have 4 separate contracts for all the funding sources we receive. Before the law department would allow the mayor to sign off on the contracts, we had to have those contracts reviewed. The city actually joined part of a lawsuit through King County. From that lawsuit, there's an addendums in these contracts. It's called Addendum 1. That language was stricken out of all those contracts. factor in what Patrick was talking about. Our program year starts October 1. We submitted our annual action plan August 15th. It had to be reviewed by our HUD rep. Then also this year, there was a new requirement where it had to be scrubbed for any type of language that went against any of the executive orders. That added more time. And then when that cleared, guess what? Government shutdown. We were luckily able to get our contracts right in before the government shutdown, but that delayed everything. So we got...
Specifically, we were able to get the contracts in, but HUD didn't, there were no HUD staff to release the monies to us during the shutdown. So even though the contracts were in, the funds didn't move.
Yeah, so we got the 3 contracts for ESG, HOPWA, and Home first toward the, right around, let's say, post-Thanksgiving. We just got the CD contract 2 days ago. We're hopeful that we'll have our CD funds come tomorrow because it takes time for them to load into a system that's called IDIS. We did reach out to groups and let them know what was going on, that just it was different. So yes, this was a more different year than ever since 2013 I've been in this department that I've ever experienced.
Okay, that's helpful. And if we get any additional questions from beneficiaries, we'll direct them to you.
Oh,
you can explain it whatever way you want to them.
No, we got it.
Okay, last question. While we were sitting here, interest rates were dropped another 1/4 percentage point. I know this is not the Department of Finance, but your best estimate as to how quickly that could result in any kind of difference in any of our our revenue line items, particularly those that have to do with the buying and selling of homes.
So that's a good question. With respect to city revenue, we do get investment and interest earnings on the dollar amounts we have
Sure.
in
So it's
the
a
general
trade-off.
fund
Yeah.
and in our capital fund. When the conversations we had with Director Gould and Deputy Director Fitzgerald in Finance as we worked through, we've anticipated these cuts. There was a lot of whispers, will they, won't they? So we expected it and we adjusted the forecast. Controller brought it up, you brought it up as we worked through the revenue forecasting meetings, that we are anticipating that with gradual decreases down in the interest earnings case.
Yeah.
But how does that impact other things? If interest rates are down, there tends to be more purchases of parcels and homes, which would then increase deed transfer, which had seen kind of the opposite dip.
But not immediately.
Not
Yeah.
immediately. The Pittsburgh real estate market is incredibly chaotic and lagging behind the nation by many years.
Okay.
So it's hard to see what that'll do.
We'd be happy to explore it with the finance department. Our typical response to something like this, one, I don't know that it's a swing that we would at this stage in the process necessarily change anything. But if we were, what we like to do is maybe estimate the interest earnings going down. I think we already incorporated that though based on the projection, but not do the corresponding more revenue somewhere else to remain conservative.
We did hold deed transfer constant for all 5 years, just because we had no idea what was going to happen.
Sure.
So hard to say right now if that could perhaps have a positive impact.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good question.
I have no further questions. Anything else that came to other members? It's been a long hearing, so I don't blame you if you don't. Okay. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thanks. And with that, I will take a motion to recess this hearing.
Can't you actually? Aren't we done?
Yeah, we have to
Correct.
keep it open. Do we have to keep it open for the one where people come in? And
Yes, we have to keep it open, but I will move to recess this
We can
meeting.
recess. Yeah.